Take the flag, place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce the public to who knows him well, Mr. Chuck Griffin, who's our alternate on the Water District. Thanks, Chuck. Mr. Brown is unable to attend this morning, or at least not here right now. Number 3, public comments. This time is reserved for the public to address the board on matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is anybody here wishing to take advantage of public comments? Please make your way to the podium. It's yours. Oh, I need that. No, I got one.
Good morning. I'm Judy Decker.
Good morning.
The board has come a long way in a short period of time in creating this new government, because that's what it is. However, you need to adjust some things. And one of the things you need to adjust is the bylaws with regard to your 2 committees. You have 2 committees. They both have AC as part of their title, standing for Advisory Committee. They could all vote 100% on something, and it still has no fallout as far as becoming a rule for you, because they are advisory committees. The rules are so stringent for those committees that especially the PAC is not making much progress. And I believe you have to have a plan in 2 years. I would suggest you re-examine the rules for those committees and make them so that they are more like the committees that you yourselves have, you that are elected officials to a board. For instance, one of the things that comes to my mind is the fact that A, the committee cannot set their own agenda to discuss things. It has to go through you. And B, it needs a 2/3 vote. I do not believe that you as board members, or you as a board member on a committee for your organization, have to have a 2/3 vote. And so I ask you to not wait the 6 months that was mentioned earlier on reviewing the bylaws, but that you get to work and review those bylaws that affect those committees now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
My name is Nick Panzer, Chairman Gleason Board. I speak to you now as a member of the public, not as a member of the Policy Advisory Committee. I have a question concerning the Brown Act. Namely, are you, the board, subject to Brown Act agenda and notice rules when you assign tasks to your standing committees? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panzer. We'll get an answer to that.
Good morning, Mike Neal. What I want to do is throw an idea out here to get put under consideration. This is what I'm going to term the 100-year interim plan for the GSP. Now, as everybody knows who's listened to the data being presented over these last number of years, the vast majority of people in this water basin, being the people who are served by the Indian Wells Valley Water District, don't have a problem. The water district has deep wells. I've been told, and I'm going to believe the statement by the manager that they have good water for hundreds of feet down. So there's not a problem there. We're talking about 25,000 people, roughly. According to the Todd report, the rest of the people in the valley not served by that system are somewhere 1,000 to 1,300, something like that. Now, those are the people who actually appear to have problems, some, and we don't know how many. We haven't quantified that. It appears to me that the real problem is there, and that's where the problem needs to be solved, instead of talking about the whole aquifer and trying to keep it, never going down, and this massive effort, ridiculously expensive imported water. Obviously, some people are going to say, kick the big ag out. They're sucking out all of the water. Well, I'm not real sure how you do that unless you expend a lot of money to buy them out, kind of too late. The other alternative is to think about some form of taxation. I would call it good neighbor tax, to help our residents who do have a problem and find a way to provide funds for them to dig deeper wells and, say, go another 100 feet down. Voila, there they are. They're good for maybe another 100 years. Now we don't really have this big drastic problem. We got to come up with a plan and start trying to, quote unquote, solve in 2 years' time. And, as we all know, climate changes. Climate in this valley has been reported to change significantly over the last 100 years. In the next 100 years, a lot of things could change. And that gives you a ton of time to find alternatives and other things, climate things change and everything else. So I hope this will get serious consideration and looking at. I think for the people who really do have the problem, and a lot of them have been the ones majorly complaining about the water level dropping, that it'll actually give them a solution to their problem instead of making everybody in the valley have to pay tons of money to keep an entire aquifer from never going down in level. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Seeing nobody else, I'll close the public presentations and bring it back to staff for some answers for some questions. First one, I think the last speaker, Mr. Neal, Mr. Hall, was talking about essentially water rights and was talking about Sigma. And I think his issues there were some legal issues associated with his thinking. Could you address those, please?
Sure. My mic on? Okay. If I understood correctly, he's correct that we need to worry about cones of depression, I guess is one way of putting it. That is how wells are actually affected we're pulling water from. That's something that you'll look at in a GSP, but that doesn't mean you don't look at everything. We have been mandated by the state of California to look at the entire basin. So that's what you're going to be looking at, is the entire basin. Are certain wells, certain areas where you're pumping, are they concentrated and therefore you need to look at them differently? Are the adverse effects different because of where you've got wells? That might be the case. We won't know until we have more data into the GSP process, but we don't have a choice about whether or not we examine the whole basin. That is what is required by the law.
Thank you. I also make a recommendation to Mr. Neal. I make sure those comments and those concerns and questions are forwarded to the PAC and the appropriate committee, so that we can fully give you a complete answer. You had some points, and I think there's some valid counterpoints. Mr. Panzer had a question. I forget what it was off the top of my head, Nick. It was Brown Act. Mr. Hall, could you please talk to Brown Act, Mr. Panzer's question?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, so let me sort of answer it as to where I think it's going. Everything your board does is subject to the Brown Act. Everything the PAC and TAC does is subject to the Brown Act. Tasks assigned to the PAC need to go through the board in one of two ways. First is the whole board would assign it to the TAC or the PAC. Another, I believe we have in here, which allows for special meetings and stuff to be called, which gives the authority and authorization for the board chairperson to authorize the PAC to discuss something. So to put it in perspective, what we were trying to do there, let's say we find out a week after your board meeting that there's something that the PAC should probably weigh in on before the next board meeting. And if your board chair are feeling inclined that everybody would agree that the PAC should look at that, you could authorize that and the PAC could take care of that. That's clearly within the Brown Act, nothing illegal about that process. So yes, it applies, but I'm not certain how we've.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Decker had some interesting thoughts also regarding the PAC and adjusting the bylaws. I think we're going to be constantly evolving as a committee, and the consideration of adjusting bylaws is going to be an ongoing process that we examine as we go through. She also talked about lack of where are you, Judy? She also talked about lack of PAC progress, and we're going to discuss that today. Okay, moving on. Special presentations. Item 4A, report by USGS on status of groundwater recharge study. Ms. Christensen.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Lori Flint. Do you have my slides up?
There we go.
No. Hello?
Yes. Yes, can you hear us? We have your first slide, yes.
Okay, you have our first slide. That's great. So this is a study that we're doing to
And excuse me for a second. Your name is what?
My name is Lori Flint. I'm with the USGS California Water Science Center. I have co-authors Dina Saleh and Alan Flint in the room with me right now.
Thank you.
This is a study looking at updates of estimates of natural recharge in Indian Wells Valley, looking at historical and future trends for the purpose of identifying sustainable amounts of natural recharge in the valley. Come on. Come on. Advance. Not advancing.
Is city staff supposed to be moving those slides on? Thank you.
No, I got it.
Okay, thank you.
So the objectives are to locally calculate the water balance with a new model that we've developed to estimate natural recharge by constraining all components of the water balance, provide validation from multiple sources to increase confidence in the estimates, and evaluate historical and future patterns of natural recharge and evaporative demand in the valley. Progress to date is we've looked at a lot of data, lots of literature. We've looked at regional climate data, gathered all the regional and local stream data. We've gotten actual evapotranspiration estimates from a remote sensing study the USGS did. We've mapped vegetation types, and we've looked at ponding on the playa. We've done a literature review for estimates of natural recharge. We've developed subbasins and estimates of those from our statewide calibration. And we've started our local calibration, where we've gotten preliminary results of actual ET comparisons for 18 vegetation types in the basin, and looked at preliminary results of model comparisons to stream flow, and looked at some ponding results. So I will show you some of those results. Just to remind you, this is using a grid-based regional water balance model that solves the water balance. So if you can constrain all of the components of the water balance, precipitation, evapotranspiration, sublimation, runoff, recharge, and change in soil storage, then you can get a better estimate of any one of those components. So we started by dividing up the basin into subbasins for reporting purposes, and these are the basins that have been reported in the past literature. I'll show you a table of those estimates. The pink background color is the DWR groundwater basin boundary. This is the recharge and runoff statewide calibration assessment. This is not locally calibrated, but this was done using lots of stream gauges and estimates around in the desert regions. When I look at the statistics for the different subbasins, I come up with something that looks like this, with a mean recharge estimate of about 5,000 acre-feet per year. This is averaged from 1981 through 2010. Remember, this is a statewide calibration, not local. In comparison to all the other recharge estimates we've been able to find for Indian Wells Valley, starting in 1913, where there were 27,000 acre-feet, and on through Todd, 2014, which had 9,800 acre-feet. There's been a lot of studies building on previous studies. Some of these estimates use things that are not part of the natural recharge estimate. So those are divided out in the last column there. We also have our national estimate of natural recharge, which is done by Meredith Reitz and others from our Reston, Virginia office. And she had an estimate of 7,300 acre feet. So ours is a little lower than that, and there's some reasons for that, and I'm going to show you how we've worked this out and where we're going with it. This is a map of all the vegetation types. So we have estimates of actual evapotranspiration for each of these vegetation types, from Sierran to the valley floor to the local mountains. And this is a first pass local calibration for this. As you can see, we did a pretty good job. What we have is the remotely sensed water balance estimate is the blue, and the one that we modeled with our regional model is the red. And the upper left-hand graphic is a Sierran mixed conifer, so we do a really pretty good job estimating the matching the evapotranspiration for the species in the Sierra Nevada. The grasslands were overestimating a little in peak years, and you can see that the vegetation on the valley floor and in the Indian Wells Valley local mountains, we're overestimating. That means we're taking too much water away by use of the plants, and there's not as much water available for recharge and runoff. So that number of about 5,000 acre feet is very likely to go up substantially in the next couple of iterations. The other thing that we're currently looking at to constrain whether or not the available water becomes recharge or runoff is the regional stream flow data. So you can see the blue boundary is the Indian Wells Valley boundary and subbasins, and the green basins with the red dots are regional stream flow data and some local stream flow data that was available. So what we do is we take our outputs of recharge and runoff and we combine them to be able to match stream flow hydrographs. Here's an example of what that looks like. The blue line is the measured data and the red is the modeled. And I have an example for the Sierra Nevada where we get a really good match. And I have an example for a basin within the valley, 9 Mile Creek near Brown, and we've matched pretty well. We're missing a few of the little peaks, and this is something we're going to be working on in the next few weeks. And lastly, we did a comparison there was anecdotal evidence suggesting that there is playa runoff on the playa outside of Ridgecrest. And this is, what I'm showing here is precipitation for October 99 through June of 2016, and our calculation of runoff in inches. So it's the depth of runoff to indicate that we can simulate ponding on the playa. So this is another level of evidence that we can actually get something that's more accurate in the valley with regard to our calculations. So we have a couple of questions for discussion. I've developed those sub-basin boundaries on the basis of the historical literature, and wondering if there are more useful boundaries for land and water resource management that would be of interest. And it's very simple to create new boundaries and extract new values. And if anybody has ideas on things that would be useful for management purposes, please let us know. The statewide calibration has lower recharge values than other studies, although they're actually averaging it over dissimilar time periods. As someone noted earlier, the climate has changed over time, and so recharge is something that differs over time as well, and it certainly doesn't occur every year. It occurs more often in wet years. So we'll be looking in a lot of detail at the historical and future trends on that. Our most recent calibration runs actually ended up with higher recharge on the order of 5,600 acre feet per year. So we're moving toward getting higher values that are more likely to be coincident with historical literature values. We require additional local calibration, however, including matching the local evapotranspiration and stream flows. Spatial distribution of recharge is a function of climate, geology, soil storage, and vegetation type. And lastly, recharge is the most elusive component of the water balance to quantify, as everybody in the room probably recognizes. Water balance closure helps to constrain and define recharge spatially and temporally over basins on the basis of spatially distributed climate, soil storage and energy balance properties, and deterministic processes such as evapotranspiration, changes in soil water content and drainage, and seasonality of water availability and demand. Layers of evidence are being compiled to help validate and support the estimate of recharge, and once calibration is complete, the analysis of historical and future trends can be done. Thank you. That is my last slide.
Okay, that was a good brief. Thank you very much. Please stand by because we're probably going to have some questions. Before we go to the public for questions, are there any specific questions the board members have?
I have one.
Go for
If
it.
you could go back to where you said that the recharge would change substantially, I think was the word you used, with additional information. Explain that to me, please. What are you basing that estimate of information on?
When we do modeling, we try to bound the problem. So we go from one end where we have very little recharge, and then we change all the variables to get much more recharge in order to have the outside ends of what the likely answer is. So in our preliminary work of doing that, we realize that the 5,000 acre feet we've currently estimating is a lower estimate. We're anticipating, and I can't say for sure, but I'm anticipating that we're going to probably increase that by at least 50 to 100%. That's my first pass guess, just based on the work we've done so far and how far off we are from matching ET and stream flow and runoff.
May I follow up?
Please do.
The Navy did the BRI study, or DRI study, that said that there was 7,700 acre feet of recharge. Can you equate the different, were you aware of that? And can you equate the differences between 10,000 and 7,700 in any way that helps a layperson understand that?
I would be glad to do that as we are more comfortable with our numbers. Okay. And I would have to review the DRA study in order to be able to understand what assumptions they made in their estimates.
Okay, thank you.
So I can revisit that. I will revisit that in the next progress report.
Thank you.
Mr. Harrington.
Following up on Mayor Breeden's question, what factors exactly is it that you will be altering in the model that you expect will be?
We change we're trying to match estimates of actual evapotranspiration, so we're changing parameterization of the model to be able to do that for each individual vegetation species. We also alter geologic permeability. So that is the underlying bedrock. If you have a higher permeability, you get more recharge and less runoff. This allows us to do a better job of matching the shape of the hydrograph. And we've done extensive work on the soil storage capacity part of this picture. We believe that we've gotten that down well enough that probably won't change. We have looked at calibrating local potential evapotranspiration estimates that are measured on the ground at CEMA stations. There's nothing real local, but we've been able to match places in the desert quite well. And other things have to do with precipitation distribution. The data available for that is not very good locally as well, but we've been able to compare that over the larger region with very good satisfactory results.
Thank you.
Ms. Griffin.
Yes, I had a question. I noticed the recharge rate was studied mostly on stream gauges and stuff. Did you take into account, or will you be taking into account, a lot of the natural springs in the south end of the basin?
There's not there's evidence of the locations of the springs, and if in fact we have higher recharge numbers where those locations are, we'll feel like we've been able to address that. We don't actually have something like spring flow in the data, but it is evidence of subsurface discharge from local recharge. So we're hoping that that's going to be able to be enough evidence when we actually have maps of recharge that we can show you. And I don't have a map of the stream locations, so it's not something we will probably use. If it turns out that it matches, we're going to be very happy.
Thank you.
If anybody has maps of the spring locations, I would like that, yes.
We'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Adam, can you take that for action? Can the TAC take that for action? Make sure she gets...
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I have a question. Could you discuss a little bit more playa runoff and where it is? And could you go to back to that slide? I didn't understand what you were talking about there.
This is showing that the properties that we have in our model for the different units, and in this case the playa itself, allows us to actually create ponded water. So that means that the water didn't infiltrate, it ponded. So that's the runoff characterization. I don't have any way of knowing. We don't have a measurement of the depth of the ponding on it, so we don't know if that's accurate. But we do know that there is anecdotal evidence that the playa ponds, not every year, but some years. And while we do have, this is a monthly model that we're using, this is good evidence that we're actually capturing some of those high rainfall events and being able to pond water on the surface of the playa.
Thanks. Before I open up to public questions, I got just a couple more. A copy of this brief is going to be made public. How does the public get a copy of this brief?
I can send a PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you very much. If we would do that, make sure I want the public to have a copy of it.
Sure.
TAC, how are you and USGS collaborating on this information and networking and all that kind of stuff? How's that all happening?
I will be going and chatting.
Is your mic
with
on?
BLM.
I can't hear the answer.
I'm going to take this question and go chat with BLM as well so that we can work with them on the information they do have if they have any spring discharge areas.
Right.
Because we need to find out what they have. And, of course, we'll talk with GS on the data that they use to show whatever's flowing off of the different mountain areas, so to speak. And if they do have the spring data, we can also try to look at that and compare with anything the BLM might have and other stuff that we might be able to find.
Okay, so we have a process of getting USGS involved in the discussion of technical development of information and characterization of our aquifer.
Yes, because
and that's
we
an
need to be
ongoing,
aware.
constant deal.
Yeah, we need to be aware of what they have, what they use. And she already mentioned that they did go through that and do have information on it. So we'll just make sure that they have everything that we think we can add to it and move from there.
Okay, last thing. Lana, you talked a little bit about iterations, future iterations, and future, I think you talked about future presentations to this board. Could you talk about that for a minute, please?
Yes, we will update as frequently as the board is interested in it. Projects should be done we should have a draft report done by the end of February, so maybe January would be another good update time.
Okay, Ms. Christensen will make that happen. Thank you very much. And I got one more question for you, Commander.
A real quick question. For the 5,000 to 10,000 recharge number, will your model provide any estimate of once that gets in the ground, what percentage is potable versus brackish?
No.
Okay.
We don't have that. That is not, this is a surface model. It doesn't say anything about what happens once it gets below the evaporative zone.
The water comes in as potable.
Okay.
The water comes in as potable.
Where it goes.
Yeah, we don't know what happens once it gets into there.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I am going to ask an unanswerable question, but I'm hoping you'll take a stab at it. If you assume that we have water recharge, let's just say on because it's an easy number, 10,000 acre feet, we're using 27,000 acre feet or more or less. Do you see us achieving sustainability naturally in a 10-year period?
I said originally that recharge doesn't happen every year, so it does depend on annual usage of water, when it's used, how it's used, where it's used. I would back off and say off the top of my head that no, you can't have sustainability if you're using more water than the natural recharge provides unless you're importing.
Thank you.
Okay, let's open it up for the public and ask the public. Any members who are having questions, please queue over on my left, your right. Identify yourself and ask your questions.
It's on. I'm Don Decker. This is a question, a general question. Is the GS assuming that there is evapotranspiration going on in the valley floor, that is water coming from the deeper saturated aquifer?
That's not being included in our estimate. That would be discharge off the playas. That's been estimated by people in the past. I could research that and find out those volumes. But that is not included as part of our estimate of natural recharge.
That's good, because there is no evidence. We don't minus
it.
There is no evidence for that quantity that I just asked you the question about. The Navy has better than a decade of playa research done by Tetra Tech and other associate companies that provides a good deal of information about hydrology at the playa and the vicinity of the playa. And if you don't have the more recent of those reports, I would suggest that you contact the Navy and request them. The report that was done, a summary report that was part of an application to Lahontan for reclassification of groundwater in the basin, has a rather stunning conclusion, and that is that the deeper water, which is at the playa, which is the water that we are actually producing from, is hydraulically separated from the superficial water. And there's always been an assumption of an evaporative loss from the deeper water at the playa. However, as we have drawn the deeper water down, the connection to the superficial water is complete, according to what they have discovered in many, many shallow wells. And the net result is that the evaporation loss at the playa is just from the ponding water that you were talking about. It does not include a component of recharge into the main water body. That's a comment for you and a suggestion of contacting the Navy. Well, the scope of this project is not to look at anything below the surface. This is a surface water approach to calculating natural recharge on the basis of the water balance. And subsurface processes, the Tetra Tech, I am familiar with the Tetra Tech report. I've not studied it, but that is something that is characterized by doing a hydrogeologic analysis and or groundwater flow modeling. That's not part of this project. Yeah, the problem, though, is that if you don't include a loss from the storage in the deeper water at the playa, if you don't understand what is happening there, your water balance equation is missing an element that is important. I appreciate fully what you're saying. I'm just pointing out the difficulty at the playa. It's the only location where the deeper water in principle could come to the surface. Thank you.
Okay, we will actually look into that and see if it's something that we can incorporate into our analysis or not.
Anyone else in the public wishing to make comment?
Yes, I'm Judy Decker. You mentioned studying vegetation, native vegetation, and we have lived here for almost 50 years, and the change in climate has caused many of the native shrubs to die. In particular, there are vast areas where there is a bush that's locally called burrow bush. It's a type of sage. It's gone, except in areas where there has been excessive irrigation. And I wondered if you were taking some of that into account. It undoubtedly is not due to recharge, rather due to climate change. Another bush is called the dahlia or desert indigo bush. Another question I had is you mentioned studying the stream at 9 Mile Canyon. That's in the very northern part of the Indian Wells Valley basin. I am presuming that you are studying stream flow in the other canyons as well?
Okay, two questions. The first one was about whether or not we could look at the demise of vegetation over time and taking that into account. The evapotranspiration data we're looking at is spatially distributed. So if something isn't there, then we're not estimating it. We're not using it. It is calculated on the basis of 2000 to 2013. So anything prior to that, we don't have a record of, and we can't calibrate to that. I showed you the vegetation map. So that's the kind of discretization we have. The background, that's the most current. The background, that pinkish background, is desert scrub, which includes the indigo bush, and then it's not clear to me, perhaps the sagebrush might be accounting for your sage you're talking about. I suspect it's still part of the desert scrub, though.
Mm-hmm.
And the next slide was the location of all of the stream gauges that we've used. So we have all the ones that are along the west side of the basin that come from the Sierra Nevada. We have things in the granites of the Sierra Nevada itself, and gauges that are in other locations. These are all the data that's available, and this is what we've got to use.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I see another gentleman back there. Any other questions? Any other persons going to have questions? So this will be the last series of questions. Lonnie, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Harold Manis, and my question is about your methodology in your programming of how you're analyzing this. Are you taking the existing data, over the years, and then optimizing your program to match it so that it has the variability as you apply it? You're trying to duplicate what's happening, and I call it the optimization of the program. And so that you can, theoretically, if you can produce or optimize so that your program produces very close or the same measurements that were recorded over the years, you can semi-produce how in the future then as our rain changes, you can simulate what can happen.
Yes, that is the case, because we have we have records from the 50s and 60s and 70s. We have records from the 2000s. For stream flow, for example, those encompass a big range of variability in the precipitation signature and temperature as well. And as we go into the future, we know that we're going to get more of those big precipitation events, and we're going to have less, and we're going to have longer droughts. So if we can capture that historically, we can only assume that we can extrapolate that into the future.
Okay, one other.
We have 18 future models we've looked at. We've done this climate models. We've done this extensively across California, the Great Basin, Lower Colorado, and Upper Colorado.
Okay, and that is including that you're using the existing or the knowledge or the recorded rainfall as with that, so that they're interacting.
Yes, that is the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Any other questions? Okay, I'm closing the public hearing. Stay with us, Lonnie, and I'm bringing back to the board for any closing comments to the USGS report. Anybody? Okay, I'm eager to ensure that we get the best and the most complete information ongoing in the process for the next couple of years. So I'm looking forward to your January presentation. I appreciate your presentation today, and I'm looking forward to making copies of this available to the public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need a vote on this? No vote. Let's move on to the next item, which is, I believe we have an update from Mr. Zadiba. Thank you, Lonnie. Regarding whatever's flying around our valley. What are you guys doing to us? A bunch of radiation hitting us, and we're all turning into zombies. Mr. Zadiba.
I hope you had your tinfoil hats on. The SkyTem work has been in the works for probably 15 months or so. So personally, I'm very happy to see it finally come to fruition. And I'll just give you an update. Right off the bat, let me just say that just the raw data has been collected. There are no conclusions at this point. I know people are anxious to find out what they discovered, but it's just the raw data has been collected. So, but I do want to give you an overview of what transpired the last week. And when I talk about we, I'm referring to the Brackish Groundwater Feasibility Study Partnership, which is Searles Valley Minerals, Meadowbrook Dairy, Mojave Pistachios, and the Indian Wells Valley Water District are the contributing partners, and the Navy, of course, is very involved in this as well. So what you see first is just a picture of the loop, as I refer to it, that is actually the instrumentation that was used. We had a ground crew show up late Saturday, November 4th. One member came from Toronto and one from Denmark to set this up. And just some information, that loop, as I call it, is 1,600 pounds. And the dimensions, it's roughly 3,100 square feet. So it took quite a bit of effort to set this up. They started working on it early last week. They did some ground calibration. In other words, it was on the ground just doing calibration, making sure that the unit was working. Wednesday morning, the helicopter pilot showed up. He was based out of Paso Robles and had worked with SkyTem prior. We had a meeting Wednesday morning with the pilot, with the SkyTem ground crew, with Renee Marquecho, with the district's engineer, myself, and with members of the Navy to go over finalizing the flight path. And literally finalizing the flight path almost went to the 11th hour. Obviously, a good portion of the basin is over the Naval Weapons Center. So there was a lot of coordination involved in finalizing the flight path with the Navy, areas that we could gain access to and areas that were restricted by the Navy. So we had that meeting Thursday. If you live in the valley, you know it was quite a lot of gusty winds. Their intent was to do some calibrations in the air. They did get up and do some calibrations on that day. The flights actually begin. I think I can control this. There we go. That's a picture of the SkyTem, the helicopter taking off with a loop at the airport. This was just prior to the test. That's actually the helicopter flying. I actually have a video that was provided by Max Helkier. Max presented to this group several months ago along with Jacob Vind. Max is with a company called Rambo. Their responsibility in this whole project was to help plan the flight path. There was a lot of planning that went into that. One consideration was interference, things that would interfere with collecting the data. And those things are power lines, pipelines, fences. So a lot of work had to go into mapping all the utilities, trying to avoid them. as much as possible. And then the other thing that Max was here for was to ensure the quality of the data. So after the helicopter landed, he would review the data just to make sure that it looked good. So Max has actually provided a little video. I think it's about 2.5 minutes. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. There's no music or narration, so just This typically flew with a loop about 100 feet above the ground. And I will tell you, in meeting with the helicopter pilot, it was interesting because part of the flight path, which I'll show on the next slide, was involved going across Highway 14 and 395. And they're not allowed to fly over cars or structures. So that being a holiday weekend, I warned them in advance that Friday there could be significant amount of traffic on the highways. So in his experience, what often happens is we have to take very sensitive. So he was concerned about cars seeing this loop and slowing down or pulling over and stopping. So when you do that, fly over it. Okay, so here are basically it's a flight path as it was flown. The contract allowed for 800 kilometers, or as you can see, 500 miles. As I mentioned at the Wednesday meeting with the Navy, we did have to adjust a couple of flight lines. If you look at the upper portion of the flight path, you'll see 2 lines that were moved back to the west. But what we were able to do is take those kilometers or the miles from those lines and do closer spacing in areas where we thought there might be more interest or we wanted to get better data. So we got our full complement of lines, but had to adjust them kind of last minute. But there you can see how the flight paths occur. And of course, they had to not fly over the city, so you couldn't fly over buildings, so we had to avoid those. As you can see, November 9th, which was the Thursday, was a couple test flights. Again, they were shortened because of the windy conditions. There were 2 flights on November 10th on Friday, and 2 flights on the Saturday the 12th. And the base was essentially finished up on Saturday, and then they focused on the areas outside the base boundaries. By Sunday, I think they finished up early noon, somewhere around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. So 2.5 days, 2 flights on Friday, 2 flights on Saturday, 1 flight on Sunday. As you can see, this is Max's comment, but he did say the data looks very promising. Again, we don't have any results to share at this point. But going forward, this is what we can look forward to, kind of a schedule. Again, this is very rough, but the data will be looked at by Ramboll, and we should have some results by December. Parallel to looking at the results, they will be looking at doing a database. And let me preface that by saying that we had a conference call with the Stetson staff because Stetson obviously is developing a database, and this brackish partnership, the SkyTem work, is part of their deliverable as a database as well. So we certainly don't want to be going off in different directions. We want to work together to use the resources we have effectively. So we are having regular conversations to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. The database, as you can see on the right, will involve digitizing e-logs, lithology, information like well screen levels, things you typically find, information on a well, depth to water, water quality. The final processing and inversion of the data will be sometime in the first quarter of next year. And then there will be a hydrological conceptual model available by spring, tentatively April. It's not on the slide, but after that, that's when Stanford University would get involved. They will do an uncertainty analysis and further develop that model. So we're looking forward to that. And as we get more progress, we can provide reports to the board and to the group.
Thank you, sir. Before I go to the public, any questions from the board? I got one. Go for it.
I mentioned this to Don, but maybe this would be something for the GA to look at. Through the TAC, I would like to know if it's possible to get the information from the Kern County Water Agency on the transducers so we could check that data at the time they were flying over, so we could actually have a checks and balance to see the accuracy, and that would show us. So maybe, I don't know if you guys would like to have the TAC look at that, but I would be very interested to know the actual static levels that the transducers say, and then what that said at the time that it flew over, to see the accuracy of that.
I think that's great.
Put your microphone
Let me just comment
closer
that
to you. They can't hear you, Beck.
Let me just comment, I probably should have mentioned that the flight paths, part of designing the flight paths was to establish control points with known lithology, known well data. So they just weren't flying areas where they didn't have information. We were looking at specific areas where there were wells drilled that we had good lithology, good geophysical logs, so that when they do fly over that area and look at the data, they can look at those logs and that information and as I said, use them as control points. So that's one way of confirming the data.
So what you're saying, to answer Mr. Griffin, is that's being done?
Well, I don't think it's answering specifically Mr. Griffin's question.
He's
looking at real time, if you can look at the transducer at that moment in time that the loop passed over and confirm the data.
Yeah, I think it's great. I don't see why shouldn't we? I think it's a great idea. If there's better information, I'm all for it. So we need to take that for action, and we'll see if we can get a match up the findings when the data becomes available from Blue Temp, or whatever this name of this place is, to the data that comes out of the KCGA at the same time, whether we get how it matches up. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I should have mentioned, I do want to acknowledge some people. First of all, the airport, which allowed SkyTem to stage all the equipment out there, it was all done as in-kind, and it was basically almost $45,000 worth of in-kind services. So Scott Seymour and Nicole Hale at the airport, I think they should be acknowledged. And I do want to acknowledge some key people with the Navy that worked on this, especially Stefan Bork. His hair is turning almost as white as mine, just trying to get these flight paths established. Stefan, Deidre Patton, Matt Boggs, and Commander Longbottom. And I'm sure there's people behind the scenes of the Navy that I don't know that did a lot of work on this, but those were the ones that really helped make this happen with respect to being able to get on the base and get that key information.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. Any questions from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public presentation, bring it back to the board for comments. I have one, financing. Can we talk about who do I talk to about costs for this and how it's all been wrapped up in our Prop 1 funding, all that kind of stuff? I just want the public to know how we're offsetting the costs for this effort.
This was funded by a partnership, again, Indian Wells Valley Water District, Mojave Pistachios contributed, Coastal Geothermal, Coastal Operating contributed, as did Meadowbrook Dairy. And the total for this, for the flight itself, was about $168,000. The total budget's $300,000, and the rest of that, of course, goes for inverting and interpreting the data and developing the conceptual model.
Thanks to all those involved with financing it. Final question is, do we own that data? Whose data is that?
The contract was with the Water District. So
the Water District owns that data?
It will be the partnership.
Okay.
Yes.
So we always have access to it?
Yes.
Thank you.
One more thing to mention. Don, thank you for mentioning about the coordination on the database. In addition to that, we got a report today at USGS and they're working on a model. We all know that DRI's got a model working with, and part of the coordination we're working with the SkyTem folks would be coordination, again, with the Navy again, on the model that's being developed there too. So all of those models need to be coordinated and make sure that we have agreement on assumptions and what the conclusion shows. So there'll be coordination on the modeling work too.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Zadiba. Moving on. Consent agenda. Items may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion by the board. Items 5A, B, C, D, and E are matters for consideration, removal, or a vote on approval from the board. Let's open to the public. Does anybody in the public wish to pull any of these items off? Mr. Hoffman, come on down. Well, I don't think you can pull it off, but you can make comment on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Derek Hoffman, legal counsel from Meadowbrook Dairy. First, I heard Mr. Zadiba flew shotgun in the helicopter ride. Is that true? I'm just kidding. I'm not necessarily asking the items 5B and 5C be pulled. I would, however, like to ask that the board take an opportunity to introduce the new committee members and provide an introduction of those individuals and a little background.
Yeah, we have
that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. We have that. I think that's planned. I'm pretty sure that's planned. Okay, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion and approval and a motion.
Make a motion we approve all as submitted.
We have a motion. We need a second.
I will second, but I did have a question about the appointment items because there's no, it gives us the names, but there's no explanation as to why the names changed. So I was curious what happened there.
Okay. Are we going to talk about that? I think we have that down later on in the agenda or not? To talk about the names changing?
It is.
Yeah, I think it is. We'll get to it before we end. We'll get to it. And if I don't, at the closing comments, let's make sure we get it done. But I think it is. So we have a motion. We have a second. Now I need a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Moving on. Item number 6. Adopt ordinance 1017 statutory limits and procedures for claims against Indian Well Valley Groundwater Authority. Second reading.
As everybody may recall, we dealt with the first reading of this ordinance last month. To pass an ordinance, we need the first read followed by a second read at which you adopt it. Given the length that we've been here so far today, I won't go into much detail on it, since we've already done that at the last meeting. Really, right now, we need to read the title of the ordinance, open public comment, and then, if you so desire, adopt the ordinance.
Okay. So we've already read the ordinance, right?
We waived reading at the last meeting, so we just need to read the title again.
So the ordinance is. So we'll number these damn things.
Item 1 of the staff report, second page. I got to put some tabs in these.
Could you read it for us, please?
I sure will. The title of the ordinance is Ordinance Number 1017, Adoption of Statutory Limits and Procedures for Claims Against the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority.
Let's open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comment on this item? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for a vote. A motion and a vote.
So moved.
We have a motion. Need a second.
A second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? Nobody opposed? It passes. Item 7, adopt amendment to bylaws, Article 11, purchase policy. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Christensen, General Manager. One of the sort of holes that we've had in the bylaws is, and again, these are the sort of the ordinances or the administrative policies of the groundwater authority, and just like a city or a county or a special district or a water district would have. This is our legal staff put together a purchase policy. Much of we can get into details, or our attorneys can get into details, but in essence, it limits and controls the way items are purchased. Puts a limitation of $25,000 on purchases under that don't have to go to the board for approval. It's relatively long. The goal would be to, if approved or if more discussion is needed, I did get some feedback from one of the board members. There may have been some inconsistencies, so I'm sure that we'll have some discussion here. But once approved, the idea will be to place this into the bylaws, into that slot where we currently have a number. I think it's number Article 11. So. With that, I think there's probably need for some discussion about some modifications. I know Member Page had some. So,
thank you. Let's open up for. Is anybody in the board wishing to make comment now, or we'll just wait? Public presentation. Anybody? Public comment. Anybody in the public wishing to make comment on this issue, purchase policy? Seeing none, we'll close it. Bring it back to the board for comments. Mr. Page.
Yeah, the first thing was I noticed that there were a couple of typos where the amount was spelled out as 50,000, but the numerical amount was 25. That was in Section 4, B1, E, and F. Subsections E and F both had 50,000 spelled out, which I'm assuming should have said 25,000. That's on page 4. And then I just kind of was trying to get a general feel for, I know state law kind of dictates procurement, public, contracting and those kind of things for public works projects. And I know that depending on what type of thing is being noticed, there's different requirements for how you do that, whether it has to be in a newspaper that's actually printed and published within a jurisdiction, or just one that's adjudicated within that jurisdiction. And I noticed that this policy specifically included the language regarding printed and published within the jurisdiction. So I was kind of wanted to get at first a general feel for how much of this is just basically restating what we're required to do under state law. Because we've kind of lumped in here all different types of purchases, whether it be supplies or equipment, services, and so I'm just not sure how the differences are between those types of purchases, what we have to follow with the state law.
Through the chair, so let's step back for a second and sort of begin with what we have here. As a JPA, we have 3 counties on this JPA. Counties have a little bit different purchasing policy than special districts. I should say a little bit different. They're kind of vastly different. We have purchasing agents. They have specific rules they're supposed to follow. Because we're a JPA, we don't have to follow those specific rules. Like there's a $100,000 limitation for a purchasing agent in statutory law for a county, and we're not going to follow that. What we tried to do here was take the water district, because I wasn't sure what the city had, and we never really got a purchase policy from the city. So Jim Worth, the legal counsel for the water district, took the water district's purchase policy, sort of translated it into a policy for this board, and that's what you have. Almost everything in this is pure policy. There's almost no legal. I think I had maybe like 2 or 3 comments total. Legal. When you're talking about the off-ramp between purchasing and public works, we cannot adopt a purchase policy that affects public works. That public works, and by public works I mean stuff that has to be contracted out through the public contract code, specific building type improvements. I mean hard facility type infrastructure is really what that is, and maintenance on those facilities. Those have to be bid through that process. And they will go through that process no matter what. This won't change that. This is really establishing how you're going to spend funds on consultants, paper products, computers, that sort of thing. And it's almost pure, in fact, it's pure policy. So
that helps then. So I guess in terms of, because it's pure policy, there's a discussion here about bids and bidders, and if we're going for services, when you evaluate a proposal for service as response to an RFP and an RFQ, cost is not always the sole factor or even a factor in making the decision about who the best one is, because a lot of times you can just make a decision on what's the best fit, and then you negotiate the price separately. You have the proposer put their price proposal in a sealed envelope, and you don't look at that until you've made the decision as to who the right person is to hire for that work. So I'm just kind of, there's references to bids and bidders, but not to RFPs or RFQs. I don't know if the way that the district handles that is a reference to bid or procurement includes any of those types of procedures, or if we need to specifically in the bylaws spell out that we might use an RFP process or an RFQ process. So that's kind of my first question now that I know that this is pure policy.
Through the chair again, I'll note one thing in here that I was kind of heading down that same path. Do we need to, look at these things, put those in there? I came to the conclusion we didn't really need to focus on it, at least as far as legal was concerned, because there is a provision in these that says if your board decides to do anything else at any point in time, it can. This is not like an ordinance that we would have to overturn. This is a policy choice that you could just say, you know what, that purchase policy doesn't work for this instance. We're going to do it this way.
Okay. The next question I had was regarding the policy as presented to us requires that we notify people of the opportunity that we're going to do a procurement by publishing something in a newspaper of general circulation that's printed and published within the jurisdiction of the authority or the county. Is that how many options are there? How many newspapers are actually? I mean, if this is pure policy and we don't have to actually publish in a newspaper by law, why would we bother publishing in the newspaper that we need a specific service when trade journals or other things might be a more effective way of actually getting bids or responses?
Through the chair again, that's a pure policy choice.
Okay.
So,
but I guess my basic question to help decide that policy issue is do we know how many newspapers are actually published within the jurisdiction of the authority?
I'd leave that
actually printed.
Yeah, that's actually the key too. It's where it's printed.
Right.
If you print it out somewhere else and bring it in, even if it's a local paper, it doesn't qualify.
Correct.
So I'll leave it to the water district. This is really kind of a copy and paste of their policy. But again, it is a policy choice, and newspapers, trade journals, however you want to go, is up to you.
Okay. And then I think the other thing I'd like to kind of have some discussion on is that there's a section here about breaking a tie. I think that's, let's see, what section is that? 4C6. Let's see, 6. And as we've got, if there's a tie between bids, we can re-advertise, award by coin toss. And I'm wondering whether, I don't see any mention, so I'm assuming that means that the water district doesn't include any kind of local vendor preference evaluation. Is it permissible under law to have a policy that would allow us to have one of the options in a tie to break the tie by giving it to the vendor that's local? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think I'm good. Those are I want to kind of figure out whether if we limit ourselves to newspapers that are printed in the jurisdiction, is that necessary, or could we sufficiently be served by publishing opportunities in trade journals, and then I'm wondering whether this board would consider adding an option for breaking a tie for awarding which of the two is a local vendor.
Are you asking this board to make an adjustment to the policy?
If other members of the board are open to either of those suggestions, then I'd like to make an amendment to the policy. But I don't want to just recommend it without knowing whether everybody else would like to offer a tie to a local vendor or eliminate the requirement to publish in a newspaper.
a local vendor is always, my answer to that from my perspective is a local vendor is always going to get preference no matter what. Whether or not we put that in there, I really don't care. I'm just going to, when it's the right thing to do, I'm going to be going for the local authorities, local agency. Mr. Griffin.
I just had a couple questions. I see in here you've got payment and performance bonds and stuff like that could be required by the board. Do we need to have anything in there as far as prevailing wage and DIR reporting for anybody that may bid it so they know that they could be subject to having to report their employees to DIR? Or is that not important at this point?
Through the chair, I don't know if you would need to put it inside your purchase policy if in fact we are heading down a path of something that prevailing wage is going to apply. I guess sometimes there might be something that wouldn't be a public works bid project that prevailing wage applies to, but we would have to, as part of the request for bids, notify them of those prevailing wage issues due to a new statute. And I say new, it's about 8 years old. If you fail to do that, if you fail to notify somebody that something is prevailing wage, the public agency can be held responsible for those penalties. So in those processes, we will do that. I don't know if it needs to be inside this, but it could be if you wished.
If I may, that's a good point. I've seen this done in different ways. Your suggestion, do we need to put it in? I would suggest some of these prevailing wage or the requirements, for instance, CDBG or some local transportation fundings from the state. Those requirements may change over time. So they don't change a lot, but if they did, then you have to change your policy. Most of the organizations, the public agencies I've worked with, just rely on the federal or the state statute and follow it as part of their bidding process, because typically if you're doing prevailing wage, it's because you have state or federal funds associated with your bid. And that agency will require you to do that. So I'm not sure that it's necessary. It's already codified in state and federal laws. I'm not sure that you need to include it. That's just from a practical standpoint. I'm not opining on the legals, but I think it'll be simpler so you don't have to rechange this all the time. These are your policies. If you have state and federal overlays for prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon, those are already codified and they can be dealt with separately. And then you don't. So I guess I'm suggesting you don't have to.
Got it. Thanks. Commander.
Yes, sir. Just a different section of the policy. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on Section H, the state or federal surplus property. Authority may acquire from the United States or state of California any surplus or real personal property in any manner and without regard to any law relating to notice, bids, or delivery prior to payment. As an associate member, I am not representing the Navy related to land acquisitions. And so while the bylaws might apply to the board, they do not apply to the United States Navy when it comes to the land acquisition. We are subject to another entire set of federal property laws. So I just want to make sure folks are clear on that.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question on direct purchase policy on page 7, item F1. Direct purchase means there's no monetary limits on direct purchase. Can you explain that as it relates back to what you say on section 4B?
That's E1. E1.
E1, thank you. Because it looks like to me, if I take that as it stands, we could decide we need to go out and buy a $200,000 Rolls Royce. And can we? I mean, clearly we would not, but under direct purchase policy, it looks like to me we would be allowed to, if I'm not reading that too literally.
Section
4B. Through the chair, I believe what you're looking at is you're looking at two different issues. The general manager, these limits in the section 4, those are for the general manager. The back here, section E1, is the board. So your board can authorize to buy a Rolls Royce if you want. Alan can't buy himself into a Rolls Royce for trips to and from Bakersfield.
Okay, I do see that it talks about the board of directors. So the board of directors has no limit on what they can purchase.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Having said that, you have to do it in a public meeting because you're the board. So there wouldn't be any behind it. So everybody understands Peggy couldn't go write a check or Matt couldn't go write a check for a Rolls Royce. They'd have to do it in a public meeting.
Okay.
Noticed.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm looking for other comments or a motion of some sort.
If there's no other comments, I can make a motion, Mr. Chair. I would move that the board approve and adopt the purchase policy that would amend the bylaws to add Article 11 purchase policy with the following amendments to the recommended Article 11 that was presented to us. First, to correct on page 4, which is Section 4 Rules and Regulations, under B, Direct Purchase Procedure, subsection E. It says, when the equipment is proprietary in character and is obtainable only from one supplier and the expenditure does not exceed, that should say $25,000 spelled out. And then in the next subsection F, at the end of that section, again, where it spells out the amount, that should be $25,000. Then I would also recommend that we amend this proposed article under Section 4C on page 4 for formal contract procedure under subsection 1A for notice inviting bids. I would recommend that rather than saying notice inviting bids shall be published, I would like to change that to may be published. I recommend that we change that to may be published, since we're not required by law to publish in a newspaper, but we may find from time to time that makes sense. And then under Section 4 Rules and Regulations, C, formal contract procedure, subsection 6, tie bids. I would like to, between A and, I'd like to do a new B and move B and down to C and C down to a new D. I'd like to suggest that we add a B, which is to award the bid to the local bidder should one of the two be local, or something along those. I mean, the lawyers can make it sound better, but I'd like to insert between A and B a new B regarding having the option of breaking a tie by awarding it to the local vendor.
Thanks, Paige. Are you done?
Yep, that would be my
Paige,
motion.
we have a motion.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on. Item 8, report from the TAC.
Thank you, IWV GA members. And a $2,000 vehicle would be wonderful for PAC and TAC chair people to use. Thank you very much. Our first item here, I'll run through our report items here. We have the call to order. It was issued, and TAC members present were recorded. All were current and active members of the TAC were present, except for Michael Powell with Rand Community Water District, who was absent, and the two non-voting members present, except for Michelle Anderson with KCWA, who notified us that she was unable to attend. One public comment that I'll bring up for number 2, Stuart Field suggested that a modified Pledge of Allegiance be committed to returning the basin to sustainable groundwater levels through reduction of extraction and or importation of water at the beginning of each meeting. There was a lot of laugh after that, but I thought you'd let you know. Number 3, approval of previous meeting minutes, the October 12th combined PAC and TAC meeting minutes and of course, representing the TAC participation comments, et cetera, were all approved. Moving to number 4, administrative issues. DWR Representative Tim Ross was not able to attend the meeting, but will be present for the December meeting. He will discuss the latest DWR goals and objectives to assist GSA and be available for comments and questions for TAC meetings that he has been invited to. Also, a kind reminder to the TAC members was given to them to finish their ethics training. Number 5, discussion of priority projects and tasks. Water Resources Manager report. Jeff Helsley of Stetson Engineers attended the meeting to give those reports. His first report, Proposition 1 application. The final draft was released October 30th and will be submitted by November 13th. And of course, he offered questions or discussions on the Prop 1 application process that it was done at this time. Discussion of the PAC-TAC involvement and more set goals is desired, including more data on the plan of action and milestones, also heard as the POAM. I will give a few top concerns that were discussed. Excuse me. The PAC-TAC contributions to the plan are not explicitly mentioned. No mention of the plan of the POAM and how to meet that schedule. Funding levels for various tasks specifically needed. GSP funding levels should be larger, as a comment. The TAC is more than just public shared input and instead would like to see collective brain powers to be utilized. A concern that work is repeated, minimizing duplicating work and used elsewhere. A comment from Tim Parker discussed the upcoming SkyTem pilot survey for their MRI data in Indian Wells Valley. TAC members will have upcoming opportunity to discuss and provide analysis of the SkyTem data. This information will assist in the brackish water feasibility study and the conceptual model improvements for the IWV GSP. Also, a WebEx internet program will be set up in the near future. This was also discussed, and I believe this happened yesterday. Jeff Helsley mentioned in response to questions that Stetson is aware of the IWV GA involvement with DWR and that members of the TAC will always be included with any DWR questions or comments. The next item for C was the DRI model review. Just a quick status update. Mr. Helsley went through an overview of the status. Mr. Teasdale commented on the DRI and reviewed the model with the new SkyTem data. The TAC should be given opportunity to review the data and ask questions, address other questions, and provide comments. This information provided to the TAC in a timely manner would be very beneficial. Stetson comparison information of the DRI model and the state requirements was also complemented by Mr. Teasdale. Mr. Helsley also mentioned that Stetson is aware that the DRI model is part of the critical path and provides a good framework for future additions to the model, including SkyTem data. That will be provided. Stetson has received many comments and questions and will be prepared to answer more at future meetings. There was a public comment, the DRI model regarding data gaps, and will the USGS and SkyTem studies provide helpful data? Tim Parker indicated the SkyTem data will assist the data gap coverage, and the USGS study is focused on recharge. I also additionally commented with Tim that the SkyTem project will provide subsurface geophysical data. The USGS data will focus on surface recharge. D, database development. Status was updated by Mr. Helsley, overviewing the database development status. He explained that a holistic graph will be used to link different data in response to any questions. Next item E, discussion of TAC topics. Mr. Teasdale and Mr. Decker have put together a topics list, which was reviewed by the WRM, and Mr. Helsley went through the document and suggested prioritizing this list of items, which can be done and given to the GA board for approval. These items can be listed and keyed into the POAM timeline. More comment from TAC members regarding the GSP were made at this time. Members would like to see tasks scheduled and directly given to the TAC, GSP agenda items that needed attention. what plans for any items, modification of the Stetson contract, participation, funding, and timing of TAC responsibilities received from the GA. Deadlines to all parts of the GSP development over the next 2 years, including grant fundings and rewards for the DWR from AWV, GA assistance, etc. of comments. Additionally, the GA authorization of all TAC tasks and the agenda items was further discussed, and members of the TAC desired that agenda items and future GSP tasks must be decided upon by the GA and given to the TAC determined with possibly a chart or a Gantt schedule showing the time, such as week by week or month by month timing framework with different priorities. This schedule, task, and agenda discussion items may be done, say, within 6 months by the GA or other times that you decide. Not only would items be shown on the agenda chart and Gantt, but ad hoc subcommittee setups with different TAC members during the GSP design is likely to be very helpful, and we recommend this during the next 2 years. Item number 6, discussion draft TAC procedures. There was a discussion on TAC-related items that would be generated by the GA and given to the TAC with sensitivity levels, perhaps in a high, medium, and low levels that will apply to each item for the TAC agenda, perhaps another graph. A TAC chart would be good to have. This chart would be used to show items on the agenda. This was also mentioned to Stetson. Additional comments were made regarding, once again, a chart showing the agendas for the TAC. These agenda items can have the same dates within the Gantt chart schedule and the timing for each item. All items will need to be approved by the attorneys. This was mentioned, and therefore at this time there was a motion that was made. This is the request by the TAC. TAC requests that they be given a set of action items or tasks about the plan of action and milestones, or POAM, and that these items show the scheduled times specific to all GSP items that are issued to the TAC for discussion. Item 7.
How many items do you have?
Just a few more. These are smaller.
Okay.
May I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Review of the tasks by the previous meeting, October 12 meeting, for additional specific tasks given to the TAC at that time were reviewed and fine. Discussion number 8, discussion and review of salt nutrient management plan. Tim Parker provided a quick presentation on the status of the SNMP draft final stages. B of this, Mr. Parker reiterated that the IWVWD would distribute drafts of the SNMP ahead of time, and the review will happen at next month's meeting. Mr. Parker also explained that the SNMP needs to be in place in order to meet a regulatory requirement, and it will be open for public review at the next IWVWD board meeting, and the SNMP can be included in the GSP if GA board does desire. Item 9, discussion of status on the yearly CAS-GEM data. Michelle Anderson submitted the October data provided by the Navy and KCWA. CAS-GEM reviewers are satisfied with this data, but have requested that any well changes be submitted and new names established. Currently, all wells listed will be maintained. None will be removed. Another note, the history of the CAS-GEM program was discussed and also has been identified as the groundwater monitoring elevation data for the IWV that has been used since the fall of 2011. KCWA has provided the groundwater information, including elevation data, contour maps, every year and every 5-year changes, hydrograph data, etc., for decades, as they have participated with the Indian Wells Valley Cooperative Groundwater Management Group since it was established. All of this data is currently available to the public from the current IWV groundwater website established by the co-op group before. This data will be freely given to the Groundwater Authority and will remain accessible to public. Item 10, discussion of items to consider. The SNMP will be an item in the future, and Stetson will provide a review of the DRI model to TAC. Item 11, approval of and recommended future TAC meetings. Wednesday, December 10th at 1 p.m. is the next approved meeting. For future meetings, TAC is continuing to request future dates for meetings. Will occur 2 weeks before the monthly Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority meetings. The dates will be decided by GA for 2018. So we will simply be there. We recommend that we continue 2 weeks before. Item 12, committee member announcements or comments. A comment was made about a list of action items that will be provided to the GA. These items, if approved by the GA, will become part of the future agenda items presented to the TAC. That will continue as discussion in this meeting. A charted POAM Gantt future was mentioned. Item 13, the adjournment was done. The meeting was adjourned at 4:16 p.m.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. I'm going to go to the public and ask for a public comment on the TAC report. Seeing none, I close that. We got one. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Derek Hoffman, legal counsel for Meadowbrook Dairy. And there's a theme that emerged from the very great report that was just given by Mr. Bingham. And the theme was a request that the TAC be given a clear, keyed schedule and a list of tasks and assignments so that that process can more cleanly merge with this overall schedule of developing the GSP. And for those of you that were at the TAC meeting, I know Mayor Breeden was there and others, and also at the PAC meeting, and we'll hear from the PAC chair in a moment. Those committees are very capable. There's a lot of brain power on those committees, as this board knows. But there's a need for a clear direction so that those meetings can become more effective. And there's been some questions asked about what are the procedures, what's the process, how do we pull it together? And just for the board's convenience, I would just refer you to Article 5 of the bylaws. There are provisions in there that rather clearly, I believe, provide a process under which both of the committees are engaged with the Water Resources Manager in a way that brings that collaboration and that timing together. So I would just ask that the board consider that as you look to fulfill the request that's just been made through the TAC chair. And I expect you'll hear a similar request through the PAC chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see other public comments, so I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for comments. I got a bunch. You want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll start. POA&M. You know, we had at one time a pretty good POA&M, and we don't seem to have that now. And I think having a POA&M is going to satisfy most of your needs and the tax needs, because it's going to be a compilation of requirements, tasks, and timelines in order to achieve those tasks. So where are we with the POA&M?
Good point. I was going to update that if you didn't already. The POA&M has been, it's actually been converted to a Microsoft project software. It was completed this week. Yesterday, after we completed converting it, so that basically it was identical to what was already on the POM, so we have everything there. We then made some adjustments to make sure the schedule and the task and the projects and the work going forward, that it all matched what we included in the Proposition 1 application. So is it on? Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. So the POAM right now includes all of the tasks and all of the projects that were included in the prior POAM. Plus, we've modified it and updated it to match the application that we just submitted this last week. That was released last night to Alan for distribution. And this morning, when I found out that they didn't send it out to some of the interested parties, I had my staff send it to Commander Longbottom, to Eddie Teasdale, to Don Zadiba, and Tim Parker. The people that were involved that have been asking about the POM had him send it directly to them this morning. So it's out. It's there.
Thank you very much. That should help alleviate a lot of assigning tasks. I got some bigger problems. I don't like what we're doing. I don't like this process that you come in and you read minutes and everybody sits here and some people are listening, some aren't. And I don't think it's an effective how we spend our time, because it's precious. We have to find a way to do this better, to have the results of the TAC and the results of the PAC get to the board, so the board knows what you're talking about. Those reports will be public comments and public property, so the public can also have access to all those inputs, and we get hit on the things that are important. And I think we nail some things that are important. I don't need to know how you guys spent the entire hour. I just don't need to know that. I don't think this board does. We just need to know what you're doing, and we just need to know, the big ticket items. Furthermore, I want to take this, and I'm asking you to develop, so we got to come up with some process doing this. I'm not a hydrogeologist, a geohydrologist. I don't even know what that is. So I'm not capable of telling you as a TAC member where to go to find a solution to the problem we got. He is. I'm not. I'm here to provide, to step back and let you people do your thing, monitor how you're doing, make sure tax dollars are spent correctly, and see you achieve success in a certain way. And I think we can do that by this board spending a lot of time understanding the POA&M as it is developed and as it adjusts through time. And then all I care about is making sure that you hit the wickets, that you hit the hit that you need to hit in order to do it. I don't need to approve your actions before you do them because I don't understand geohydrology as much as you gentlemen do and ladies do. So, Water Resource Manager, could you comment on that? What I'm suggesting is this. We develop a POA&M extension one. I guess we already have done that. Yeah. And then I'm suggesting that this board somehow take a larger perspective, step back, take a larger perspective, and monitor rather than delegate and assign, and give you the responsibility of assigning and delegating and integrating. Could you comment on that? And then I'd like to hear what other board members think about this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try. It's a pretty big question. Yes. And obviously, I think part of what's going on is a certain level of frustration on the process going forward. We talked earlier about manpower and applying manpower to projects and what we're doing. So I think this is part of the same question is what we're doing. To back up a little bit, when we first were brought on as a water resources manager to try and develop a process going forward, one of the first things we did, we obviously listened to you folks, and you folks brought out a lot of important initial assignments or tasks that you felt were important that be addressed right up front. We worked with the staff, with the general manager, to identify those and put together scopes and budgets to address those. A couple of meetings ago, we actually brought those work tasks before the board and got authorized what we call the 6-month bridge budget for things we were going to do. Certain things that we're trying to accomplish, certain things that are very interested, that you folks are all very interested in doing, are constrained a little bit by the budgets that we have until we get funding into the organization. We have a 6-month bridge budget where we have certain tasks that we're working on, and we presented those once before. And in addition to the items that we identified scopes and budgets for to work on, which we are working on, we've been giving reports on what we're doing there, we also identified some other important work tasks that we know were important to you folks, but based upon funding and financial constraints to move forward on some of these projects, we're not working on them right now because they haven't obviously been scoped, budgeted, and haven't been assigned. I'll just walk through real quickly the budget items that we have. We obviously have a budget item that we're working on, prepare for PAC, TAC meetings, and board meetings that we work on. So that is a budget item that we're working on, and it's a continuous. We have a fairly large budget item right now with the Prop 1 application. That one's pretty much been completed. We submitted. I'll give you a report on it in a few minutes. We are reviewing. We're doing a third-party review of the DR groundwater model. We've been giving reports on that, and we will be providing a report back to the TAC, I believe. If we're going to have the December meeting, it'll be at the December meeting. Same thing with the database. We're working on the database. A lot of collaboration working on the database, and we should have if we don't have it in December, we'll be in January and update on where we're at on the database. So those are all individual work tasks that we've been assigned. Project management costs and schedules. This was just a normal work task that we put in to manage the project. We've added to that the POAM, and we've got that completed, so that is out. And those were the projects that we've been assigned for the first 6 months. We should be coming up on some new assignments, I would imagine, between December and January, February, some new scopes and budgets on new assignments. We included what we thought were the most important additional work tasks that were important to you folks and important to the GSP, and I'll just read through those. One of them was third-party review of sustainability safe yield review. We don't have a budget to work on that yet, Some of that work is being done through the DIR model. We're certainly getting information from the USGS presentation. We're going to certainly get information from SkyTem. There's a lot of good information. We're certainly familiar with the Todd report, so a lot of that work's been done. But when we put together an item for a scope and budget or work task, that generally means to me that we're going to bring back to you a work product that will be reviewed, taken to the TAC, reviewed by the TAC will assess it and then bring it back to the board. That's a work product that we're actually going to produce something. So we have not yet been assigned the responsibility to do that yet on the third-party review. Another task item that we had heard a lot about, and again, there's different positions on this and the folks we've talked about, but we added it because it appeared to be very important. That was an opportunities and constraints analysis or review of the availability of imported water. And again, we put this in here as a scope and budget where we would produce a work product that'll bring back a report to you folks, to the TAC, a report to the TAC that says these are the opportunities, these are the constraints, and the amounts and the quantities, and this is a review of what imported water looks like to you folks. Give you the opportunity to give input on it, make sure it's complete. When it is complete, then bring it to the board. That would be the approach going forward on that item.
Excuse me, Steve Johnson. May I make a quick comment?
Sure.
You can give us this opportunity. Let us know, and GA, so that we can give you our knowledge also and what we are aware of with importing groundwater into IWB, which we do have quite a bit, and we'd be happy to do that if that comes back from you, or if the GA does like us to move forward with that. That would be good.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
The attempt would be that if we put together a scope and budget, the scope work would include reaching out to all of you folks and getting all the information you have, and consolidate and bring it back into a deliverable product that summarizes it all, gives some direction, maybe even give some recommendations on where we should or shouldn't go for the TAC to look at. If the TAC's comfortable with that, then bring it to the board. That would be the approach. Okay. So I've got just a couple more work task items that we had listed. One of the other task items that we had that was not budget is actually starting to draft the GSP, chapters 1 and 2. Again, we have not been authorized to start that yet, but we certainly can. And then the last item that we had listed on most important tasks going forward was providing a engineering support to the ongoing projects that you have. For example, the USGS study, the brackish study, SkyTem, the other studies that are currently being done by others, was providing engineering support to those projects. Again, when we put it down as a work task, the idea would be, because right now we are following those, we're keeping track of what you folks are doing, but as a work task, we would actually provide hands-on review and provide some type of a work product that says this is what we think about that, this is where we're at on that item. So we don't have any manpower constraints. Our constraints right now are on authorizations to move forward on work tasks.
Got it. Okay. Would a POA&M, did the POA&M that you submitted,
yes,
does that answer those questions?
It does identify things that need, same items here, things that need to go forward. And I think as Adam pointed out from the TAC, one of our suggestions to the TAC, the list that was provided by Mr. Decker, it was provided by Mr. Teasdale, the list of items, and there was a lot of overlap, but there's some very good items in there. Those items should be looked at, and we mentioned prioritizing those. We should look at those items and make sure you folks are comfortable with the priority, and then look at the POM and make sure the POM is consistent with those priorities, and then we would move forward on those items.
You folks being okay with those priorities, you're talking about the TAC and the PAC?
Correct.
Okay. Talk to me about the POA&M. I've mentioned a bunch of times, is the most, in my opinion, the most important governing document of this board that we can produce. Would that answer, if we had an approved POA&M, that would give you an understanding of the tasks and the timelines that your TAC has to achieve, correct?
Yes, it would. That would be wonderful.
Okay, so where are we on the POA&M, bringing it to the board for our approval?
It was released for review at the TAC, and the PAC was released, and to the board.
Okay.
It was released last night and this morning, so it is out. We need comments back.
Okay, so at our next meeting, we could have an approved, theoretically, if all goes well, an approved POA&M.
It should be no problem.
And that would scratch your itch in terms of getting your TAC members to understand where they got to do, what they got to do, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, it would.
Okay. Final question on this is, I'd like to ask you a philosophical question.
Sure.
Philosophical question is, here we are, you are developing a GSP for us. And there's a bunch of variables that need to go into this GSP, importing water. treating water, conserving water, and timelines associated with a myriad of issues that you're going to need to deal with. Yes. What I would like to know is how is this POA&M, or are you prepared to discuss how you're going to prioritize, expend your resources, and what is your philosophy going forward in answering all those different questions?
Good question. We have taken a preliminary look at what the situation is out here, and some good questions were asked of USGS, Ms. Flint, about what she thought about sustainability, natural recharge, and the amount of, the mayor asked about recharge versus the amount of water we're pumping. Is it sustainable over 10 years? You got a very good answer from her. She says it's not sustainable. We've taken a preliminary look at just some of the reports that are out there where Todd is at, some of these studies, the USGS study, the DIR model, other studies that have been done on the basin and where we're at right now. And we're not ready to give you a definitive answer yet because we still want to do a methodical review and provide it back to you with all the information summarized so we can actually present it. But it's pretty clear that essentially everybody who's looked at the basin and looked at the situation, it's an overdraft. We're taking more water out than goes in on a long-term basis, and it's not sustainable the way it is. There's several ways, there's several solutions to that that need to be addressed. We're tabulating, we're putting those together in our office informally. There's no formal work, just mentally trying to figure out where we're going to be to try to organize our thoughts, because at some point we're going to need to present those. We will likely, as we do the third-party review of all the other studies that come up with our conclusions, we'll present those, make sure everybody's on the same page as to what the natural recharge is versus what the production is, long-term production, and then identifying what the opportunities are to either bring in imported water or reduce extractions. We're going to bring all that information out and review it probably at the TAC level and get input as to where we're going to go to get to our endpoint. And each one of those items that we have, the tools that we have to get us sustainability, they need to be reasonably quantified and then reasonably addressed as who's impacted and how we address the impacts to those folks, because there will be impacts. There will be impacts, but there are ways to address impacts too. So that's where we're headed right now. It's informal, but we're headed toward a more formal review of all of that.
Got it. Thank you. You said the magic words in terms of collaborating with the TAC.
Yes.
To come up with the answers.
Yes.
I'm satisfied that this conversation will help improve the process by which the PAC and TAC report is. Once we have an established, accepted POA&M, we can put that POA&M up on the board. Everybody in the place can look at it, and you can comment on that POA&M and where we are in terms of that POA&M and how we need to adjust it and change it moving forward. So I'm looking forward to getting that POA&M up on the back of me so that everybody in the town can look at the deal. Commander.
So I checked. I haven't received it yet, the POAM, so I'm not sure where it's hung up in the distribution. But so I don't have I have a couple questions now that we're talking about it. Does that POAM, does it have assignments? Who owns each task? And does it have quantity of dollars required of this board to execute each task?
I'm not sure about the first one. The second one, I know dollars have not put in. I know that we talked about it before. We looked at the POM before, and we had some bridge budgets. You had mentioned that we ought to put dollars with this too. We plan on doing that. We thought we'd get the priorities and everything organized and where they roll out to and where the critical paths are. Get that done first, and then bring the dollars in. At least the ones that have been approved, the ones we know about. Okay. At least get those in.
So you have the tasking and the sequence of taskings in order to get, and it stops at GSP development. So the POEM is not yet extended past execution of the GSP.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
How far behind are we?
With the schedule we put in there, we're not behind because we've moved everything forward. From the old schedule, yes, we are several months behind with the old schedule. So when we did the POM, we took what was presented originally and we reproduced it and got it working with all of the roll-ups. Then we moved things around and modified it to match what's in the Prop 1 application. Prop 1 application shows us completing on time.
Okay, and so this is what I want to caution us on. It's very easy to squeeze things on a plan of action and milestones to make it look like we're going to hit our date on paper. I think we need to be ultra conservative on how long and how much money it's going to take to get each of these items done and look at where we're at. Because again, being under the Brown Act and how we meet and how often we meet in order to put rubber on the road, we may have to kick it up a notch or two to get to the end. And we're not going to know that if we don't have realistic constraints in the poem. Thank you.
Just as a reply to the Commander, your point is extremely important and very well taken. We've had that exact same discussion in our office because some of the adjustments we've made, my guys are saying, we're condensing these things. We've also talked about the meeting schedules and possibly the need to kick up the meeting schedules if we need decisions, if we need feedback, we may need to kick things up going forward to make things move faster. Absolutely correct.
So I guess, sorry, is it possible to get a version of the poem re-release that has realistic timeframes with it then?
I got a better question.
Okay.
Let me take that over. I want a POA&M before this board in the December meeting.
Yes.
And I want to sit down, and at the end of that meeting, it may not be the final draft. It won't be the final draft of a POA&M, but I want a POA&M that is at least beginning us and getting us on the direction and getting us to a point where we're meeting our deadlines in a timely fashion. Sure. At the next meeting.
You bet. And Commander, I will make sure you've got it. I did get an email, copy of the email this morning that Stan in my office sent it out to you folks. So it should have gone, but I will double check and make sure he'll send it again. But I get a confirmation this morning that it was sent.
Will you be able to put dollars in that at that point in time?
Sure.
I want the dollars in there too.
Sure. Yeah.
Even if I understand they're not written in stone.
Yes.
Approximate. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important we get comments back from the TAC folks on the roll-ups and the critical paths and the priority items to get those to make sure you're comfortable with those. And then we'll semi-finalize or put a final draft together on the poem, and then we can add the dollars to it very easily.
So I think we have direction for the TAC, which is full speed ahead on development of collaboration and getting that POA&M moving.
Absolutely.
Defined.
If anybody else wants the POAM, just let myself or Alan know.
Yeah, anyone on our board, in our committee. Is that a public document? Did that become a public document?
Yeah.
I want to be careful on how we manage public documents because this POA&M, we may change it completely.
Sure.
The approved POA&M and what we're debating on publicly, I'm okay with. But to release something in the POA&M, for example, if something weird came up, say we're not going to look at imported water, I don't want that to get out to the public until this board has a chance to chew on it and make the prior adjustments. Legal. You have a question about that?
Well, if I'm hearing you correctly, some of that we can't do because it's going to go to draft stage to the TAC and then the TAC comment and then back. So yes, any internal drafts we have are internal drafts, not subject to the Public Records Act. But once we put it out in an agenda pack, be it the TAC or the PAC or the board, it's public record.
That's fair enough. That's good enough.
And we'll just put draft on every one, and that identifies its draft until you finalize it.
Yeah, we intend to number these and put revision dates whenever we change them. So there will be a record of all changes, too. You can always go back to find the one, a previous version.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from anybody on the TAC report? I need a motion to receive and file.
Just a question. I've attended several of the PAC meetings and only one of the TAC, but it's been a cluster, as we've noticed. But to organize that better, like Mick said, I agree with what he said. We have a lot of people that are good at science and engineering, and let's let them handle that along with your work. But I believe the first step is defining what is sustainability so we know what target we're looking at reaching. And I haven't seen anything on that. So have you worked on that, on what our sustainability actually is?
No, we haven't. I mean, you're seeing some information, for example, today with USGS, from their perspective, and it's kind of superficial, it's kind of an overview perspective, but they're looking at sustainability being, something probably less than 10,000 acre feet of production a year without imported water. Okay, that's what they're looking at right now under current conditions. Can we get to that? It's going to be tough. So yeah, it will be looked at. We will be doing that evaluation and coming up with what we can define as what is sustainable for this basin.
Okay, because that's my concern is, we can say our sustainable is to decline a small amount each year or something like that. So I believe it's important for the TAC to have some kind of goal to know where we have to go. If we can say, hey, we can decline 3 inches a year, we can maybe compensate here with some blending and different methods that we have here in the basin, so we know how much water we need to be looking for. So I was just curious about defining that sustainability for our basin. And I think that's very important.
Sure, I absolutely agree. And between the residents and what we call the stakeholders in this basin, you're all stakeholders in this basin, those decisions will be made along with overview from the state, from DWR under the GSP. I mean, they're going to be overlooking. They're not going to let us put together a plan that doesn't have sustainability. But you folks will be involved in the decision making of what works for you.
Okay. We could argue that all day long. Anybody else have any questions? I need a motion to receive and file. So moved. Need a second?
I'll second.
Public hearing is closed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion passed. Move to the next agenda item, which is the PAC, report from the PAC. Good luck, Donna.
Okay, the PAC members took the following actions and discussions to make the following requests for the board to address. Number one, following the PAC request number 6 from our October 19th PAC report, which stated the PAC members would like to have an opportunity to discuss the PAC-TAC procedures document presented by the Water Resources Manager at the October 12th combined meeting. The PAC included an agenda item on our November 2nd agenda entitled Review PAC Procedures. The PAC members reviewed the IWVGA PAC-TAC meeting procedures document and the red line version of that document. There was a free-flowing and passionate discussion. Some of the comments included, regulations and procedures are ill-defined and too constrictive. Why are our hands tied? Why are we here? PAC should stand down until we get tasked by the IWVGA board. Request that the IWVGA board clearly and specifically task the PAC as stated in September 21st PAC report, number 1 item. Question regarding the identity of authority staff. This would be the ones who review the agenda items. The red line statement says final approval lies with the chair, the vice chair, the general manager, and legal. I believe there is a role for the water resources manager too now that he is in place. It just seems that there are a lot of steps we need to take to get the agenda in place, and certain day limits on deadlines for that as well. Does the PAC chair have the ability to suggest items for consideration as PAC agenda items? This does not seem clear. Suggestions made that the PAC have the ability to form ad hoc committees as necessary to address specific items for implementation of public outreach. Make sure that this item is addressed as soon as possible. When does the 6-month review of the bylaws occur? Procedures and restrictions may not be malicious. They may simply be a way to be cautious as we are all getting our foundations established as new agencies and committees. PAC members are ready to take a more active role. Members of the public in attendance identified the PAC as the people's voice and encouraged the PAC to continue meeting and making their voices heard by the IWVGA. So our recommendation to the PAC chair for presentation to the board, number 1, recommend that the board have a standing agenda item regarding specific tasking for the PAC. That is on each of your agendas. requests that the IWVGA provide a set of action items or tasks that are keyed to the POAM with the timeline schedule attached. Okay, the second item, PAC members ask the IWVGA board for clarification regarding PAC actions to implement components of the outreach strategy. For example, establishing the website or a Facebook page. Do postings require review and approval by the board, staff, and legal? What is the chain of communication for release of information to the public and to our PAC representative constituents via Facebook, a website, or other means? Number 3, Lorelei Oviatt has informed the PAC that she will no longer be able to provide the minutes for PAC meetings, although I believe that she will try to continue to attend the PAC meetings as an advisory representative for Kern County Planning and Natural Resources Department. Stetson Engineers has not budgeted for any clerical assistance for the PAC, although the Water Resources Manager will provide reviews of agendas and minutes. The PAC has been asked how we will provide minutes for our meetings. According to Section 5.10 of the bylaws, quote, an individual appointed by the board shall prepare written minutes of all PAC meetings, which shall be available for public inspection once reviewed and approved by the PAC. We request that the IWVGA board make this appointment as soon as possible. Number 4, the PAC requests an answer from the IWVGA board regarding a question from a member of the public at our November 2nd meeting. Will there be a notification to property owners and others who may be impacted that the development of the groundwater sustainability plan has started? This is item number 3 on the list of components for the outreach strategy that we attached to the initial notification letter of intent sent to DWR after the combined meeting on October 12th. Is the notification a general one to all within the boundaries of the groundwater basin? Is it a specific legal notification by the IWVGA? How will it be addressed and whose responsibility is it? Please reference the GSP Code of Regulations, Section 353.6, Initial Notification, pages 9 and 10, and Section 354.10, Notice and Communications, page 13. Request of the update for the status of past recommendations of the PAC regarding appointment of alternates for PAC members and appointment of Audrey Schuyler as a DAC representative to the PAC for the community of Trona. Those were tabled at the September 21st IWVGA meeting. We have not officially approved upcoming meeting schedules, but we generally agree that we will meet on the same schedule as the TAC. We need to put that down as an item to be approved by our PAC. We are also, a suggestion was made that we develop a form to track volunteer hours and in-kind that are being provided by PAC committee members. I want to make one other suggestion. We did have, I was invited to an informal meeting with the small ag PAC representative. She put that meeting together with the small ag constituents. And I attended that meeting. Adam was invited, and so was our chairperson, Mr. Gleason. So if any other groups would like to do that, would like to have myself or others meet with them to discuss inputs, comments, questions, I'm very willing to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Appreciate it. Public, you have any comments on the report, PAC report?
My name is Nick Panzer, Chairman Gleason Board. I speak now as a member of the Policy Advisory Committee. I'm going to semi-read a statement here and then more loosely comment on it based on some of what's happened in the last hour here. As a supplement to Donna's PAC report, I offer this opinion. The effectiveness of your PAC critically hinges on two success factors. The first critical success factor is this. All stakeholders must have a chance to directly engage you in tasking your PAC. Their vital interests demand a say in when you task and what you task to your PAC. The second critical success factor is this. Your tasking of the PAC must clearly and tightly request policy advice on specific GSP elements. After all, you alone are responsible to task the PAC, while PAC is responsible for policy advice on plan elements, and nothing more. Hence, PAC success depends upon your clear requests for policy advice on specific plan elements. Now, how would I modify that? Whether that comes through you or through Stetson, through delegation, doesn't matter as long as it's crystal clear. Bylaw 5.9 is very clear on what our responsibilities are, which is policy advice and nothing more. It's equally clear that you, the board, are charged with tasking us, and you are the only one charged to do that. Your legal counsel, Mr. Worth, made that crystal clear at the September 13 PAC meeting. PAC is not free to task itself or even to decide what it discusses. It has to be directed, and that has to come from you, or I assume a Brown Act delegation of that authority. I had one other comment. Give me a second to see if I can recall that.
Take your time and hurry up.
Oh, thank you. I'll quit right there.
Vic will give you a second bite of the apple if you need to come back with that other thing. Thank you very much for your time, for your thoughts. Next up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Don Decker. I'm here also as a committee member, a TAC member, and I would, I'm following in some ways what Mr. Panzer just offered to you. The conflicts and the confusion that exists between the procedures document that this board offered to us 2 months ago or thereabouts, maybe it's been a little further than that back, and what you just offered today, which you said, Mr. Gleason, that the committees need to read the POAM and to derive their substance from the content of that document. That is exactly what we talked about at the last TAC committee meeting. We're seeing a lot of frustration on the part of the TAC and the PAC. The skills and the knowledge that's contained there is being wasted, is the proper word, by basically just inaction on the part of the board to provide the basics here. The board should not be directing at any detailed level what those committees are doing. There should be an authorization for the WRM to engage us, and there needs to be some understanding, I think, on the board's part that you have two committees that are very capable, and the idea that we cannot put agenda items readily onto our agendas is absurd. The fact of the matter is that the POAM, once it is in good order, provides the guidance document. It's something that a number of us have been saying from day one. It is the critical document that guides this whole thing. And we need to be talking about that POAM at every one of these meetings, not just in general terms. We need to be looking at what items are coming up and what the actual schedule is saying. Everybody who is involved with the product, which is the GSP, and that includes this board, needs an action register, and they need to have that very clearly in mind as we go forward. We all have a place on that POAM, and we need to know what it is and need to pay attention to it constantly. Your comment, Mr. Gleason, that we need to have it up here on the wall, the 2 hours for the meeting here doesn't really give us an opportunity to study. That needs to be before the meeting takes place. But the critical areas that are coming up that we know we're going to have troubles with need to be identified over and over and over again, and hopefully solutions found to work through. So I think that original procedures document needs to be, I won't say it needs to be thrown away, it needs to be completely rewritten with the understanding of what we're trying to do and how we're going to get there. And your suggestions today, Mr. Gleason, are totally welcome, and that is that the committees have a responsibility to the board to perform in a manner which doesn't involve endless levels of approval of agendas. That is, as I used the word earlier, that's an absurd state of affairs to allow to come about. That's what I have to say for you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
I'm glad Mr. Decker spoke before I did, because now I get the chance to second pretty much everything he said and emphasize that this board will take heed to what they were just told and suggested, that they'll probably find that they accomplish their task a lot quicker and with a lot more efficiency. As far as what was talked about at the PAC meeting, I want to emphasize to this board that this agency, which has been an agency, a separate agency for some months now, needs its own separate website that persons of this basin can go to, that with all the information that is on the county website needs to be transitioned to that website, so that when people go to look up, when they find out, their neighbors are beginning to tell them that all this thing is coming their way and their water use is fixing to get regulated and they're fixing to probably have to pay more taxes and so forth and so on, that they go look, and then there it is, the Groundwater Authority website with everything relevant to its activities and data and everything on that. I realize that some of the county staff thinks that what you have now is sufficient, but I do not think that's sufficient. And so I hope that they will take this to heart and somehow figure out a way. Obviously, might take some funding, but find a way to make that happen. It's very important that it's easy for the rest of the residents of this basin to access this information in a ready fashion.
Thanks, sir. Next up.
Through the chair and board, this has been a real frustration, probably on both sides. But we saw this coming months back when we were talking about developing the PAC and the TAC and how critical it was we have this. And I know, Mr. Gleason, you continually said that the PAC will be doing the heavy lifting.
Right.
Now going back, I'm trying to find out where it seems to me that they're trying to find relevance. They need to be relevant. There was a process rather complex to get this established, and everybody for a long time has been waiting for the TAC and the PAC to be developed, as if they're going to be doing the heavy lifting and bringing the technical information necessary to give a broader view of what we need to expect. But I think I think the frustration is not only in the public, but with the committees and no doubt with the board. And I don't know how we can resolve this, but I do know that Sigma stresses continually the importance of stakeholders being heard. And we must continue to stress that. And the PAC is the voice, gives voice to the public. That's why we have the representations on the PAC that we do. And if there's no voice, they are not relevant. If there is not a way to bring if it has to be defined by the board, what they can look at or the items they can address, I just kind of question, where is the voice of the public? How do they access? Going back now a little bit to, there was not I didn't find a place to speak to this when Commander Longbottom was stressing the importance of the deadlines on timelines. And I understand from Mr. Johnson that about the limitations are going to be defined by budget restraints. I think we need to clearly understand how the budget restraints are going to affect the timelines, Commander. And I know we appreciate your stressing this because most business people or people who have to make things happen have to have that has to come into play. And where we have such a broad base being involved, I think we need to get clearly defined what kind of budget restraints are going to keep us from meeting those deadlines. And I'd like to hear some more clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferris. Next up.
West Katzenstein, member of the PAC. Just had a couple brief questions. Right now, I think the only means that the PAC has to really discuss the items of interest to the public is if a comment is brought up by the public during our meeting, since we're not allowed to have that on our agenda ahead of time. And I guess I have a question for legal. If say we hear some what we consider to be an important question from the public during our meeting, are we allowed to discuss that as if it were an agenda item, or is our responsibility strictly to bring that comment forward to the board here?
Do you have, Mr. Cassidy, how many questions do you have? Is that your question?
I have a second question as well.
Ask both of them.
The second question is somewhat unrelated to that, and that is I entirely endorse what's come before me, the previous few speakers here. And a question about the POA&M. I worked with Microsoft Project. I find it to be extremely powerful, even to the point you can manage your finances with it if you choose to. But also, it's very detailed. And I think the kind of questions we're asking lie in the details of individual tasking. Sometimes you have to peel that onion many layers when you're using that software to get down to the layer that might describe, for example, the actions of the PAC. And the problem is, I think if the public doesn't have access to the Microsoft Project software, I'm not quite sure how you can peel that onion, or how if they want to see the details of the plan. And I just present that as maybe a challenge in using Microsoft Project. I don't know if there is such a thing as Microsoft Project Lite that the public might own that would allow you to at least to review the content. But I want to throw that out as something to be considered.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Let's get you the first answer from our legal team.
So if I understand the question appropriately through the chair, the question is, if somebody shows up at a PAC meeting and in public comment would like the PAC to address something, can the PAC address that? And the answer is mostly no. That's why we have agendas, we have action items, and something that's going to be addressed and becomes an action item has to be on the agenda. That's why we have an agenda review process. That's the whole process there. That is what public comment is for, is to bring something to the PAC's attention so that they can think about it in the next meeting, not address it then when other people in the public, which might have a differing view, aren't aware of the item. So that's why that's mostly a no. With the mostly no, I'll give you where the little bit of the yes is. The little bit of the yes is, yeah, you can have some basic conversations about it, but you can't really turn it into an action item. That's sort of why we have agenda review, and I'd like to go into some of the other questions which tie directly off of this, if I could.
Sure.
So let's step back and manage expectations a little bit. The TAC is doing the technical work. The PAC is providing policy. The TAC is as set forward in the bylaws, and as we've done through the many months we worked through the bylaws, they are directed by the water resource manager to address things as he puts them together. The TAC isn't writing the GSP. The TAC isn't writing elements of the GSP. The water resource manager is writing the elements. They go in a draft form to the PAC. The PAC then does a real-time review, analysis, comment, shoots it whatever you've done as many arrows as they would like, and then it becomes final. And if there's any disagreement, the disagreements will be brought to the board and addressed. The PAC is different. The PAC is doing policy. That's why they're directed by the board, because they're set policies that are policy issues, not objective technical issues, and they're sent down to the PAC that way. That's what the bylaws provide for. And as we talked at the very first PAC meeting, when somebody wanted to talk about Prop 1 immediately, which I understood, if that's the case and there's something that comes up, we have a process where you can ask the board to be tasked with that item. And that's the process we follow. If you're a member of the public and you would like the PAC to look at something, you can come during public comment period and ask the board to task the PAC with an item. That's the process. And the board can task that item within the Brown Act. The agenda review process, I hear a lot of complaint that it's some onerous process. That's the process all public agencies follow. I mean, we've got the chairperson who's running the meeting looking at it and saying, this is what the agenda is. We're not getting into people's discussion points. We're getting into what the agenda says for an action item. That's cleared. General manager clears it, so the general manager knows if there's any outside issues, and then legal clears it. Not to limit your ability to speak on anything that would be appropriate, but so that you don't have items on there that aren't appropriate, that are, for example, illegal. Or when I say illegal, I'll say that are not within the confines of what a GSA can do. So that's the review process. It takes literally 5-6 minutes to read it and check it off. It's not I don't understand how it's an onerous process of reviewing the agenda to say, okay, there's nothing on this agenda that legal needs to be at the meeting to provide advice on, or something else, or that this item is, needs to wait for something else in the process. So it's important to keep that in mind. When the chair was talking earlier about how committees run and how they're going to get task stuff, he was addressing the TAC. And the TAC is being run by the person drafting the GSP. That's not the board. The PAC, on the other hand, is dealing with policy, and that's run by the board. So that's why it's different.
Thank you, sir. Underlying, are you done, Wes?
One follow-up.
Sure, go ahead.
Just a little follow-up here, if you don't mind. So if a member of the public brings us a particularly heartfelt and important question in our estimation, in the minds of the PAC members, how does that carry forward? Could we perhaps have an ongoing agenda item within the PAC to elect to bring candidate PAC agenda items to the board? That could be a way we could respond. If the public had a particularly challenging question we thought should be addressed, if we had an ongoing agenda item in the PAC that would allow us to bring candidate PAC agenda items to you, that might be one way we could proceed.
Thank you for the question. We'll get you an answer. I would defer that to the PAC chair, and let's see what she has to say when time comes appropriate, and we'll cover that. Yes, ma'am.
I have attended all the meetings that have been held, both the board meetings and the committee meetings. I am a former Water District board member and currently sit on the Resource Conservation District Board, which is also a Brown Act board. I see no reason why the chair of the PAC, Mrs. Thomas, cannot develop an agenda, email it to Mr. Johnson, and he can approve it or not approve it and send it back. I do not see why it has to be so complicated, which is basically what I said in my opening public non-agenda item comments. This is an advisory board. It can vote that you all should buy everyone on the board a triple banana split, and it won't make a darn bit of difference because they're an advisory board. They're not even a board, they're a committee. And I also see no reason, like serving on the Water District Board, where a member of the committee cannot ask to have an item, as long as it's appropriate, placed on the next agenda.
Thank you.
I think you should change your bylaws to be a little less stringent and give some leeway. We're not talking about rewriting the U.S. Constitution here, although what we are going to come up with is extremely important for the future of this valley. But don't tie the hands of the committee members so that they can't even operate.
Thank you. We're going to talk about that. Next up.
Harold Manis. I think I've already heard most of what I was going to say because, gentlemen, you have allowed, this board has allowed, or you have not developed the organizational interaction between the PAC and TAC and yourselves so that they have not, and then they have not developed to what you think they should have done. And on top of it, like she said, your bylaws, your laws have restricted them from doing it. And what you need to do maybe is to consider having a multiple of meetings here, because if you'd have been having meetings, say, the last 6 months, once a week or twice a month or three times a month, you would have been on the interaction and gotten the feedback that you should have had. I'm not criticizing. I mean, this is open criticism because it's criticism all around. And hopefully there's a learning process going on to where you'll review it and find a way to bring everything back up to the speed that it should have been now, instead of just allowing the limits of the legal limits of everything to hold everything back. And then everybody says, hey, what happened? Well, we couldn't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see no other input, so I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back. Oh, I'm sorry.
Back onto the agenda item, maybe I should try to be a little more clear on this. The reason legal reviews it is to make sure that there's nothing from a discussion point that is really moot because we can't do it legally. As an example, this GSA cannot say we are going to prioritize all water use in the basin for Indian casinos and nothing else. That's not legal under common law. It's not legal in the law, period. So having that discussion at a PAC is just wasting your time and efforts. That when we say legal review, that's what we're reviewing. Is this something that can even be discussed? I understand there were items at a PAC meeting a couple of months ago where we had attorneys showing up at the meeting because the agenda scared them. And I understand why it scared them, because there were things on it as written which would scare me as an attorney if I was representing a private client, because they're not within the confines of what this GSA can do, let alone what the PAC can do. So when we're talking about legal review, we're not trying to constrain the PAC. We're trying to put the PAC on the right lane of the highway. We don't want you driving down the wrong lane. We don't want you driving in the opposite direction. So I understand that, it goes through a process, but the process is there to stop that, and it literally only takes us 5-10 minutes to review it and say, that's good.
Thank you, sir. Public process is closed, and now I'll bring it back to the board members for comments and consideration. And should I start? I guess I'll start. I wish I had words to describe the frustration I feel and seeing the frustration you sense. And I wish you understood how important it is to me to clear that frustration and get past that frustration, because I understand clearly that every PAC meeting to date has 100% attendance. Every one of them, 100% attendance, despite the fact that they feel that they're not accomplishing a lot. I don't want to lose that. I want to support that. I want to develop that. I want the PAC to play a integral role to whatever level it is designed to play, and I want them to succeed in advising on policy. I think, Ms. Thomas, that the POA&M, once it's fully developed, will give you a guideline on how to direct your team in discussions in anticipation of what issues need to be discussed at that time. So do you agree that the POA&M, if it's fully developed and if it's a vibrant document, will help you in achieving focus in the PAC?
Yes, I would agree to that.
I think, I'm not putting you on the spot, I'm not going to quote you, but I think I'm with you in my hope that the POA&M will help both the TAC and the PAC develop focus, develop timelines, and begin to develop a better understanding of where they are in the process and what they need to be contributing on. I believe there are several things I got to read here that I got to get to, but I want to talk about the standing agenda item. I think that's a good idea, and hopefully that will be more developed as we move along in terms of the PAC involvement and the contributions from the PAC to the board. These are really important because this addresses. I'm trying to address frustration and give more concise tasking to PAC members. So here we go. I'm going to ask you guys a bunch of questions. I've got a bunch of answers, and I'm going to give them to you right now. Question 1. Regulations and procedures are ill-defined, too constrictive. Why are our hands tied? Why are we here? PAC members are ready to take a more active role. Should the PAC stand down until we are tasked by the IWVGA board? Answer. The timing and forming of the PAC was prior to the tasks that the PAC would be asked to achieve. Meaning, this is a whole new level of governance. We had no idea. We were just designing a structure. Without knowing more specifics about what ill-defined and constrictive means, it is difficult to respond to the question. However, remember that GSAs are new governmental agencies. There is no history, tradition, or standard procedure that exists. We are creating a new agency which includes duties and operating procedures of the PAC. To this point, the board has directed the PAC to do 3 things. 1, develop a community outreach plan. 2, develop language for a letter of intent to develop a GSP that was sent to DWR regarding community outreach. And 3, review the Prop 1 grant application and make suggestions to the Water Resource Manager. Tasks 2 and 3 have been completed. Task 1 is a larger project that is no doubt challenging and will provide it's important for us to push forward. Committee members should remember PAC's mission is to take direction from the board. If the PAC determines that a meeting is not necessary until more work can be completed, then canceling meetings is acceptable until more tasks can be assigned to the PAC. And I think that will become more clear once our POA&M becomes a public and a vibrant document. Question 2, request for update of the status of PAC recommendations for appointments of alternates for PAC members and appointment of Audrey Schuler as DAC representative to the PAC. Answer. At the board meeting September 21st, the board chose not to act on the PAC's request for alternates, following the recommendation from staff. The direction was to use existing PAC membership, which is quite large. Their suggestions was the TAC take some time to work out the kinks related to operations of the PAC before considering alternates again. During peak harvest seasons, when certain PAC members may not be able to attend, the PAC members may send a surrogate to communicate on their behalf. That person does not have a vote, but he can participate in the meeting. There was also discussion of appointing a DAC member from Trona at that meeting. The board decided that there was sufficient DAC representation on the PAC as currently configured. Question 3. Questions regarding identity of authority staff. I believe there is a role for the Water Resource Manager too now that he is in place. Answer. The Water Resource Manager is available to review agendas, and on rare occasions he and his staff may call into the PAC meetings, but there is no budget for the Water Resource Manager to regularly attack PAC meetings. Question 4. This will all be public, and I have 8 questions, 9 questions, 10 questions. I'll be quick. Does the PAC chair have the ability to suggest items for consideration as PAC agenda items? This does not seem clear. Answer. The PAC chair conducts the facilities of the meeting. The chair may suggest items for the agenda, but not independently of the entire PAC. Agenda items should be developed and agreed upon at least by a majority of the PAC and then forwarded to the general manager, water resource manager, and legal counsel for review. The PAC would rarely suggest agenda items that do not coincide with the directions of the board. It may seem restrictive to ask you to go through a process, but there is a reason. If you provide your agreed-upon answers to the water resource manager, then the staff can discuss it and determine the best way to proceed. The process the PAC has been asked to follow may go slowly, and it does, but it is orderly and it is compliant with the Brown Act, which is something we all need to do. Not following the policy will actually result in a less effective PAC, and more frustration by PAC members is likely to result. Question 5. Suggestion made by the PAC have the ability to form an ad hoc committees as necessary. Ad hoc committees, answer. Ad hoc committees are, of course, a possibility. Just provide a short description of what you're hoping to accomplish and achieve. Other resource available to the PAC is the Kern County's new Director of Communications, who just started a month ago. She has years of experience in communicating to all kinds of public groups and helping develop communication plans. We offer her services to you. Her name is Megan Pearson. It's on this piece of paper. Question 6. When does the 6-month review of the bylaws occur? I guess every 6 months. The board has amended the bylaws for 2017. The board has yet to determine when a review will be performed, but it will be 6 months. Question 7. Members of the public in attendance identified the PAC as the people's voice, quote, quote, unquote, encouraging the PAC to continue meeting and making their voices heard by the GA, us. The PAC should listen to the opinions of those who speak at meetings and those that provide informal input outside of meetings. And they should, of course, be sensitive to the public input. The PAC, however, is not required to respond to every complaint, concern, and wish of the public. Ultimately, we are the elected members of representing the GSA, and we are accountable to the public. The PAC has limited powers and assignments. The parameters of membership of the PAC prevents the members from acting on behalf of the public on all issues. We suggest that the public comments to the PAC about issues over whether the PAC has control or no control. The PAC should refer those comments to the board and try to get inputs from the board. 8, only 2 more to go. PAC members may ask the IWGA board for a clarification requiring PAC actions to complement components of the outreach strategy. A Facebook page is a great idea. Answer. A Facebook page is a great idea and can be started immediately. For inclusiveness and continuity, there should be one Facebook page for all the activities of the GA, including noticing board meetings, PAC meetings, and TAC meetings. Items such as strategies should be posted on Facebook once they are vetted and approved. Draft concepts can also be placed on Facebook as long as they are clearly identified as draft and are part of an agenda for discussion. Social meeting posted by PAC, board, and TAC and staff should be controlled because they can be a source of misinformation and confusion if they are not properly managed. In other words, if we're going to have a Facebook page, we want to transmit ideas. We don't care about input. We don't care about input coming on Facebook. It's anonymous. It's not reliable. We don't know who's saying it. It's ugly, and we don't want to play the game. But we do want to enhance our ability to transmit via any social media platform. The IWGA already has a web page. If items need to be posted to the web page, you may contact Carmina Morales at Kern County. That's you? Carmina, thank you very much. With Kern County, who coordinates posting of agenda items on the web page, and there's a little more. Question 9, Lorelei Oviatt has informed the PAC she will no longer be able to provide minutes, and she will provide advisory counsel as the Planning and Natural Resources person. Stetson Engineering is not budgeted for any clerical assistance for the PAC, although Water Resource Manager will provide reviews of agendas and minutes. The PAC has been asked how we will provide minutes of the meetings. Accordingly, Section 510 of the bylaws, an individual appointed by the board shall prepare minutes. Answer. There are no funding sources or in-kind resources available to pay for clerical help unless a member of the PAC are willing to provide it. The TAC performs those issues using existing members, which we encourage the PAC to implement that model. We are just informed that PAC member Renee Westerlusk has graciously volunteered to perform those functions. Way to go, Renee. Thank you very much. Question 10 and my last one. The PAC requests an answer from the board regarding a question from a member of the public at the November 2nd, 2017 PAC meeting. Will there be a notification to property owners and others who may be impacted that the development of the groundwater sustainability plan, GSP, has started? Is the notification a general one to all within the boundaries of the groundwater basin? Is it a legal notification by the IWGA? How will it be addressed, and whose responsibility is it? Answer: yes. There will be notifications as required by SGMA and other public meeting laws. However, when that time comes, the GA staff, including legal counsel, will be responsible. However, it is premature to consider notices to the general public regarding the GSP. The ultimate responsibility is for notices to the public to inform them of GSP discussions and/or decisions of the GA staff. Because of the legal requirements of SGMA, there will be significant legal review prior to individual notices or newspaper publications are finalized. At this time, the PAC need not take ownership of legal notices and notifications. Okay, there's a beginning. I hate to go through that process, I know, but I had to complete the loop today. Today we heard the minutes. I wanted to give you answers. We're hopefully going to be able to find a way to streamline these answers and get them to you in a more compact and meaningful way. Finally, my personal thoughts, and then I'll open up to the board. I think that we have started a whole new government agency, and it's been difficult. It's still difficult. It's still evolving. The PAC has limited policies to discuss because we haven't developed policies yet, because the TAC hasn't developed the data so that we can develop policies. So the PAC, I urge you to stay faithful to the cause. I believe you're going to play a significant role. We're going to use you whenever we can through the Water Resource Manager, and I hope that you can stay fully engaged. I think I'm done. Anybody else have comments? Yes, sir.
I had a question, actually. I recall several meetings ago when the PAC was first formed and there was discussions about them setting their meeting schedule, that this board directed that the chairman could provide certain direction directly without it having to come at one of our meetings. And I'm just trying to remember, was that specifically only regarding scheduling the meetings, or did that also bleed into the area of providing them tasks? I mean, have we given direction that's okay for the chairman, rather than waiting another month potentially, for the chairman to be able to say, okay, you've got this question at a PAC meeting, that's important, and we would be interested, I believe the board would be interested in finding out your point of view on this policy issue, so go ahead and work on it. Or do we need to bring that to the full board?
It was somewhat of an open question that was posed through the chair. It was somewhat of an open question posed to the board, and I will say, as written right now in these bylaws, I would say that the board chairperson has the ability on his own, without going to the full board, to task an item for the PAC if there's not time to take it to the board. And I say that in part because the board chair can authorize the PAC to have a special meeting. And why would you have a special meeting if you didn't have an action item to address? So it's in here now. It was sort of a discussion point. Did we want the whole board to have to step up? And I don't think there was any desire to have that. So yes, if something comes up, the board chairperson can task the PAC with that item without the full board on it.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable with continuing down that line of thought, that if something's important to get done quickly, I trust that you or the future chairs should be able to act on it and to make sure things are moving.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Other board member thoughts? Mr. Harrington.
I had a thought concerning this request we heard a couple times, that there be a standing item on our agenda concerning tasking the PAC. I wonder if an appropriate place for that would be in our the standing item that's developed for the Water Resources Manager report, because the WRM is, in a lot of ways, our liaison to the PAC, and if maybe we should just add that as an item to your monthly report, and then it can be discussed regularly there.
Mr. Hall.
Through the chair. public comment on the agenda now would fit that description of when somebody could bring that up. But if you wanted a separate item, specifically itemized, you could. The concept has always been that if somebody wanted the PAC to look at something you hadn't tasked them, they could ask you that in public comment, and you'd have the ability within the Brown Act to task that item then.
Yeah, I thought we were aiming more at someplace systematically on the agenda where it would be for this board to discuss with the water resources manager what the PAC should be doing.
Yeah. My comment is you're right. We've got those in there. I was just saying that we're already covered, but if we have a specific item, we're covered again.
Okay. I think a wonderful thought. I'd leave it up to the PAC chair how you want to shape that, and how your PAC committee, if you want to have your PAC committee wants a standing item, we'll give them a standing item. Okay?
I think that would be good. And as far as, making decisions as to whether we stand down until we're tasked or whatever, I guess the board, our committee, would need to talk about each of those options and decide as a committee what the committee would like to do. In my opinion, we should continue to meet because I think there are some things we can work out more specifically in recommendations, like items for the website and things like that. So, but I'd let the committee give me feedback on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're the boss. Okay, do we have any other items, thoughts?
I have one question, and I will I'd like to defer it to when we talk about the budget. I'm just concerned about the TAC and PAC budgetary needs and how we accommodate them, because I saw it like last month's agenda, we had $12,000 that was spent on the TAC and PAC by Stetson. And I'm not saying it wasn't needed, it wasn't appropriate. I don't know, because I don't know what it was they did, except there was a half a dozen people up here. And $12,000 is a lot of money. I just want to have some little bit of input on how those dollars are spent. Not as the board, but as all of us, understanding we either have more buku monies than we know about, that I don't know about, or I don't think any of us know about, or we are on a limited budget, and we are. So let's talk about that. But I just want us to remember that when we task the PAC and the TAC.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other thoughts?
I guess sorry. So I think that's a great point, and I think it ties in with what Mrs. Ferris said and what we were saying in the beginning. I think what we're missing is the POAM. Mm-hmm. And so if you have the POAM and you have your cost per action on the POAM, and it's spread over time, you know what each of those action items costs per month. And you can figure out how much money you need to go do everything. And since each of those tasks is assigned to someone, whether it be the PAC or the TAC or the water resource manager, et cetera, you know what the budget is for each of those organizations. And so coming through from month to month to month, we can start cross-comparing actual charges with what the budgeted charges are. It comes, I know you're probably sick of me saying it, but it's the POAM. That's the reason I brought it up a year ago, and it's the reason where we keep emphasizing it so adamantly today.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chairman,
yes, please.
You pointed out that the board through the chair, had given direction for three major tasks for the PAC previously, and one of those was development of a community outreach plan. One of their additional questions was regarding starting a Facebook page, doing social media posts. I guess what I would seek clarification for is when would the PAC be ready to present an outreach plan, a community outreach plan? I mean, I don't want to get ahead of where we flip the switch on a Facebook page, but we haven't talked about what the
totality.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to put it on the next agenda for the December 6th meeting, is to begin looking at some booklets that are already available that have general information about the whole Sigma process and the public involvement aspect of it. And some of these could be put on a website. You know, we wouldn't have to have hard copies for everybody. So some of these are available on the website, but I'd like for the committee members to review several different ones and decide which one they like the best, that sort of thing. And I think we should definitely have a schedule of all the meetings, you know, and invitations to the public, especially that PAC meeting is available for their involvement. Those sorts of things.
I'm going to just jump on top of that for a quick second. I'm more interested in, very much interested in that, but I'm also interested in how are we going to reach out to the state authorities? When are the AQUA meetings? What organizations do we need to be members of within the state? How do we reach out to the Navy? What offices in the Navy? What are their phone numbers? What are their jobs? What's their tenure? When do we go? Who goes? How do we influence federal decision makers and state decision makers? Not only just thinking about our community, but going beyond our community to influence all those folks. So I think that would be a good part of our outreach plan. Okay, anyone else?
I think the AQUA meeting's in 2 weeks.
AQUA meeting's in 2 weeks. Okay, does that mean you're going? Is that a volunteer?
I have not been authorized to pay to go yet.
I'll call. Yeah. Okay, are we done? You open this can of mess there, Ms. Thomas. Are we done with your item yet? I think we are.
I think so. I think it's clarification for me that the committee members do not have to take the responsibility to establish the website or to set up the Facebook. We just make the recommendation to the board, and you do that, right?
No comment.
We do have a commitment of funds, donations to help with establishing a website.
I heard. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay. I think the POA&M is a good answer to both PAC and the TAC. I think that's going to help us out a lot and relieve a lot of frustration. I need a motion to receive and file the PAC.
So moved.
Second? Anybody?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item number 10, Water Resource Manager Report. A. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to try to make this quick. You've all been here for almost 3 hours now, so I'll try to make this as quick as I can. One is just an announcement, and I talked to Adam a little earlier on this. You've heard us talking about the CASGEM, and the process of maintaining the CASGEM is not changing, but we were changing the designation with the state. I wanted to report that was accomplished this morning in accordance with the state guidelines. The application was made and submitted and accepted this morning. So it's another box we're getting checked off. So that should be done. And I'll go ahead and do both of my items because the second one's pretty short, and then we can do questions if we need to. The second one is involving the groundwater model update. There is a handout up here. It's the same handout. Most of you folks either went to the PAC or the TAC 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago. It's the same handout that we provided there, so there's no new information on that handout. We did talk today a little bit about what's going on with the SkyTem and the fact that that's going to result in a groundwater model. So I wanted again to report that our review of the DRI model, along with the GS work that's going on, the USGS work that's going on with the model, and the SkyTem model work, all that work needs to be pulled together to make sure it's all consistent. So we will be making sure that does happen. Along with the model and the modeling work, I wanted to again compliment the Navy and DRI on their openness and they're willing to work with us and make changes or whatever needs to be done. There's a strong emphasis by the Navy that DRI model is very important to the Navy. We recognize that. Anytime I talk about the Navy and the database or the model, I want to emphasize we understand the security requirements and we will always be looking at making sure that we've got the Navy's security interest right up front when we pull this stuff together. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. There is a planned presentation for the model review at the next TAC meeting, which will be next month in December. So that will likely, I'll work with Adam on that. We'll like to get on the agenda. I'll probably have Gene Moran come in and give an update on where we're at on that. So that's on the schedule. So that's the model update. Very short on Prop 1. Everybody, we certainly appreciate everybody's contribution. We had a lot of very, very active interest, a lot of good comments, and a lot of support in getting this Prop 1 application done. The completed application was submitted to DWR on the 13th. We did receive confirmation of a successful submission by DWR on the 13th. We did release that out to everybody who we provided access to that application, the notification that it was successfully submitted on the 13th and 14th. So it's in, it's done. We will be providing periodic updates in our coordination and communication with DWR staff. Any information we get, any questions we get, we will be sharing those back. If it's something really important, we'll distribute it to everybody. Otherwise, we'll wait for a meeting and share what the question is or additional information they've asked for. So we will be doing that. And I think that's my report.
Thank you, sir. Public comment on the general manager report. Seeing none, I close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for a vote.
I move that we receive and file the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Bring us to item number 11, general manager report.
I will try to be as brief as possible. Item A, we are transitioning the management of this agency to the city of Ridgecrest. I've had some good talks with the new city manager of Ridgecrest and the city clerk. We're going to be shadowing. They'll be shadowing me. That will happen in January, so that's good. But it's coming up. Budget review. I included, I'm sure there'll be comments on this, but I've included in your packet some budget material. Without getting too far into it, I can address two numbers. Basically, I've updated the budget that you adopted earlier actually before the calendar year started back in December, almost a year ago. I've updated that on, you have two columns if you have that material, the proposed budget and then the actual to date. I really want to address two numbers that will give you an idea of where we're at. We had cash in the bank, in essence, of $75,000. And we used that to cash flow, to pay for and to cash flow certain items that are going to be reimbursed by grants. By contrast, we have expended $89,000 and $89,577. The County of Kern is fronting that money right now. I don't believe that they are concerned about this fronting of money, but I think that as that grows, if it grows, that will be a concern. The good news is that some of those expenditure items will be reimbursed. We've submitted, for instance, there's a $10,000 bill to the USGS for progress payment towards the report you saw today, that work that they have done thus far. We have submitted that to the grant, to DWR for the grant we have. There's some other funds of Stetson's that has been requested in reimbursement, another $30,000. So that will be coming back. It's a reimbursement grant. So I guess the reality, I don't even want to say guess, I know that the reality is that as we start spending more money, and Mr. Johnson from Stetson indicated this, we have put them on a limited, we've tried to control their expenditures through the end of the year, anticipating that we would either have some idea about grant funds, or we would have a discussion with there's been some talk of the water district perhaps under certain conditions providing some kind of loan of funds. We are reaching the point of we are not reaching the point. We have reached the point of need to resolve that quickly. If a cash flow plan is not resolved by the end of the year, My fiduciary responsibility is to ensure that we have funds to pay bills. I will have to tell Stetson to stop working. That would be in contrast to all of the comments we heard today about all the needs that the community has. So we need to resolve the issue of cash flow, whether it be a loan. That's probably the only, some kind of loan from someone in the short term. All of the let me add to that some qualitative information. As I listened to what was, and I'm going to try to be brief, but we have burned a lot of energy thus far, a lot of time of Stetson. We spent lots and lots of resources making sure that the public had every opportunity to the nth degree to review a grant application. Okay, that is above and beyond what the norm in my experience. But we did that, and those resources were burned. In fact, there was more desire to have more meetings, and we just cannot afford that. To spend $45,000 to $50,000 on a grant is a bit much. So, but we are controlling the expenditures, but there's not a lot left to do. Some of the more important things, such as focusing on the GSP. I would characterize what, in my experience of just watching from my vantage point, I feel like I go back to my childhood watching Saturday morning cartoons, and I liked Roadrunner, the Roadrunner hour. All right. And the coyote is always chasing the Roadrunner. And how many times did you see the coyote spinning his wheels and going nowhere? But he's burning lots of energy. That's what we have been doing a lot, burning a lot of energy. Movement is the GSP. So we have to. I would characterize this as we need to take a deep breath. And let me correct some beliefs that I think have just continued to surface. Yes, we're in a hurry. We have 2 years. We are not behind the 8 ball. We're not. Okay, we have 2 years. This is a manageable basin. But if we continue to constrain ourselves and act as if we're in this mode of we can't get it done, we won't get it done. So I would say relax, tap the brakes, back off, and let's stop spinning our wheels so much about process. We'll get there. I have been told by the water resource manager that as of today we could get a GSP done. There's nothing preventing us from doing that, but we won't get it done unless everybody takes a deep breath and relaxes a little bit. There's been some very good things here, but let's not squeeze this to death. I know that's not what people want to do, but I think that's what's happening. And I will use my one biblical reference today because I think some of you will appreciate that. Ecclesiastes 3. To everything there is a season, a time to every purpose under heaven, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. So we need to refrain from, I think, worrying so much because that's just not going to be productive. Those are my thoughts. I'd be happy to answer questions about the budget.
Let's talk first about rescheduling the December meeting because we're putting all 3 of these together.
Yes. I was going to get to that, but yeah.
Let's do that now.
Okay.
My thoughts rescheduling the December meeting is I don't want to leave being the chair unless I have a approved POA&M, so I want a December meeting for this board. We need several things to do before I'm willing to release this over to the city. I want to give them a hairless effort, so we need to schedule a meeting. When are we going to have this meeting?
If I could jump in, if we did, right now it's scheduled for the 21st of December, which is pretty close to Christmas, and that is not going to work. If we did the previous week, that's the 14th, that's a Thursday. And I've been told that's a planning commission meeting for at least one of our attorneys. I don't know when there are Wednesday meetings of the council, city council.
Council doesn't meet on the 13th. They meet on the 6th and the 20th.
I've been told by the attorney that, by Mr. Hall, that we could have, if this was difficult, we could have a meeting of a majority here and then two others call in, and that would be acceptable on the 13th or some other day, if scheduling is a challenge. We could have attorneys call in as well, or at least a couple of them, perhaps.
What day?
13th.
What day is that, on a Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Do we know that the council chambers are free that Wednesday, Mr. Strand? It normally is, correct?
13th. Board members, how are we looking?
And what's wrong with the 14th?
Planning commission meeting.
Planning commission meeting, but we have I won't speak for Mr. Hall too much, but we do have backup attorneys, but he's our attorney of record right now.
If Keith could fill in, there you go. He got a thumbs up.
The 14th wouldn't work for India.
Would work for India?
Would not.
Would not. Okay. Next option. Is there another option? Easy option? Is the 7th available?
Does that give us time to get everything done?
What day's today?
What is
Okay, 14th.
We were okay with the 13th, but not the 14th.
How's the 13th looking for everybody? Anyone cannot do the 13th?
Going once.
Okay.
Going twice.
We got a meeting scheduled on the 13th of December. If you can make it great, all we need is a quorum. So we'll get the 13th done. And so we have a defined agenda. We know what we want to achieve by the 13th.
Chair, we need a quorum here physically.
Yes. Right. Got it. Okay. Let's open the public comment for General Manager Report. Item 11. Anybody got any thoughts? $10. Any?
Okay.
10:15.
Wait a minute. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Can everybody else do the 13th? I mean, what days are we talking about? The 14th? 13th? Can everybody else do it? Okay, we're going to do it the 13th.
I will do my best, see what I can rearrange.
Sorry. Okay, public is closed on item 11. Board members, I need a vote and or discussion on item number 11.
I would like to see more information on the budget. I would like to see us estimate what, I see that you've had a proposed budget for $326,500 for the fiscal year 17. And I'm wondering, I'm sure that's as accurate as you could possibly get it. But my concern is, where do we come up with that money if we don't get a grant immediately or we don't get a tie over from some other agency? And I would like to see next time, if we don't get a grant, what do? We aren't going to have, I know we're going to get some money, but are we going to get the $2,700,000 and some odd thousand we asked for? I'd like to have a fallback plan.
Sure.
And I'd like to know basically the impact that I do not know the total impact on Kern County of operating
and managing the GSA for this year, but I would kind of like to understand that more fully. We have discussed tasks with staff, how the city is going to accomplish this. I'd like an estimate of how we're going to do that monetarily.
Do you mean how much time?
What did it cost you to prepare
Time.
the budgets?
Got it.
What did it cost you to prepare the agendas? What did it cost? Those kind of things. So, because we have 8 or 9 items that we've agreed on that the city will do, and the money part of it stays with Kern County.
Right.
And I'd like to see what the impact of that is, so we understand, because I know that next year the water district is going to face that same burden that the city will pay and face this year. But there is about 12 items, and about 9 of them stay in the hands of the city in conjunction with everyone else.
So we did that list, so put a dollar value and hours associated with those.
Approximately.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Commander.
I would also recommend budget-wise that in concert with the poem, we start doing this time phase so that you can recognize the cash flow pinches. Because looking at it from an entire fiscal year, we can't tell. We could be out of money tomorrow. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, thank you.
And then, Alan, the only reason that the coyote never caught the roadrunner is because he didn't have a poem, man.
Thanks. Anyone else? I need a vote on item 11.
Can I just get clarification?
Yes, sir.
We're going to be adopting our 2018 budget at our next meeting, correct? Alan, will you be presenting our 2018 budget for adoption at the next meeting?
Yes. Yes, I would do that. Thank you.
So are we just receiving and filing? We've given direction about
Yes.
the next meeting.
Yes.
So I'd make a motion to receive and file the GM's report.
Looking for a second.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Everybody in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item number 12, closing comments. Yes.
I was just wondering about number 5, B and C, resolutions for appointing members to policy and tech.
Yeah, I can
We approved it, didn't we?
Oh,
announce it.
right. The announcement is we are going to move Mr. Scott O'Neill from the PAC, and correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, from the PAC to the TAC, and we're appointing Mr. Dave Janis to the TAC. Is that correct? You asked for some other thing about his credentials?
No. That answers my question. I had a feeling there was some swapping going on, but there was no backup. It was just the names. So.
Right. And those two gentlemen are here, so we can throw dots at them if we need to beat them up.
Maybe they can raise their hands.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments? Closing comments. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Yeah. After we approved the purchase policy in the bylaws, Article 11, the commander was pointed out that we had a numbering problem near the end. There's 2 section H's. So I don't know whether we need to have a new motion to adopt it and add renumbering at the end, or can you administratively just fix that?
Through the chair, we can fix typographical errors.
Thank you. Anything else? Closing member comments? I see none. That item's closed. We are ready to retire to closed session where we're going to discuss conference with legal counsel and anticipated litigation. So we're not adjourned, but we're going to close session. We'll adjourn later. Thank you all for being here.